everybody, and welcome to June the 10th, Children's and Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Do I have any apologies for absence, Vanessa? No apologies. Okay, it's lovely to welcome Jessica. Oh, I don't think she's here. Jessica? No, we've got Jacqueline. Welcome, Jacqueline from Abbey Court. Lovely to see you, and thank you for joining us. Record of the last meeting. I'm sure you've had a chance to read it. I checked it and there were no errors. Is everybody happy for me to sign that? Brilliant. Thank you. Agreed. And urgent matters arising. Obviously, we've got agenda item 6, which is Oasis Restore School update. And we had a supplementary agenda, which I hope you've all had time to read, that was circulated. And obviously, we need to consider this as a matter of urgency because they're on an improvement journey. Okay. Item 4, any disposable pecuniary interest. Sharon.
Hello, I want to declare, Chair, an interest in Article 9 because I'm exploring a care provision. So I will remove myself from the discussion.
Thank you for that, for transparency. Anybody else? No? Brilliant. Okay. Sorry, I just need to turn my page. And we're on item 5 of the agenda, which is obviously our wonderful Youth Council and their conference. Can I just say before you start, I read lots of information, but I have to say, from what you produced, it was such an excellent conference, and you put the report so clear with a huge amount of thought and work, but also what I gleaned from it was you listen to our young people across Medway and you ensure that our young people are heard. So I just wanted to say that as a thank you. So over to you guys. I hope everybody's had a chance to read that fantastic report.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Under the assumption that everybody has read our report, is there any questions?
So can I start with Adrian, then Mark?
Well, no questions, but just a lot of praise, I think, because I think once again you've produced a really thoughtful, certainly was thought-provoking as far as I can remember, conference report with great depth. And I was very impressed with the understanding of both the advantages and disadvantages of the use of social media and AI. And also I thought there was young people were showing a really sensible approach to undesirable content on social media, which is very good. And I think on balance, just banning something is not the right approach, but certainly I think the educated approach that you seem to be taking as collectively as young people is good. I did find one of the statistics in it quite amusing. And it says that 8% of our young people thought it was a good thing to use AI during their homework. But 74% of teachers admitted to doing it for the marking. So I thought that was a very interesting balance where I would have thought it should have been the other way around, if anything, but never mind. But well done. I think it was a really, really good report. I've learned a lot personally from it, and I think it's a good contribution to the debate that's going on about controls on social media, and I think it was a very good balanced report. Well done indeed.
Thank you, Adrian. Mark?
Mine again is not a question. Thank you for everything you do. Reading through the bits about social media, relates because I have a 13-year-old son, and the amount of time that I sometimes think he spends a bit too much online, on social media, on gaming, but to actually see that, and it's a broad thing. It's me just being very old, I suppose, and it's how society's changed. But it is really good to get that feedback, and the understanding is that they know most of the children are aware of the risk. So when you're asking the questions to Alex, which is quite an apt name because that's my son's name, it was really, really good to read that because that opens my eyes up to a little bit. And yes, I do worry when my son's online and what's happening. But it gives me some reassurance is that our younger people nowadays, all they know is being online, being on the web, and online gaming, and they're well aware of the risk. And I know my son, he doesn't play with anyone he doesn't know. It's always friends, and they exchange their online names with each other, and they go together. There is games he plays where he has to spend extra to get the currency for them, but he always asks, and it is really, really good to see that it seems to be a broad thing across the age group. So really, thank you for that, because that's helped me reassure me a bit about some of my worries for my son. I won't stop, but because like all parents, we continue to do it. But I know that a lot of them, like the ones you've come across, they're quite sensible when they're on there. So thank you.
Thank you. Douglas, then Sharon.
Thank you very much. And this is twice in 1 week I've had the opportunity to big up the Medway Youth Council. I had the privilege of hearing you directly present some of your findings and push questions back to us in terms of our positions. What can we do to support you? So like my colleagues across the aisle there, it's more to do with recognizing that we're on a journey, but particularly young people, you come to this place with a tremendous amount of ability, more so than the older generations. And that is the gauntlet that you put down to say, look, there's this new technology afoot, and older people do not get it. And there's a risk of draconian measures being put in place just so that we can control it, yet it's ever present. And at the same time, other countries are moving faster ahead, and the new jobs of tomorrow might exist more in the virtual space than in the real physical space. So it's important that we have young people's voices like your own challenging that whole debate in terms of how can you have an environment where you trust your young people with this technology, but at the same time you don't stifle innovation. And that's the challenge that we have from hearing your report and hearing the questions you posed to us. So no, thank you very much for that. And we, as adults in the room, I think we have to level up, because this technology is coming so fast down the line. If we are leagues behind, we're doing our young people a great disservice by not being able to keep up to speed on that. And I will close by one quick story I did share on the night when I was watching a parent and their daughter exchange a conversation around the technology. The young person was given an old, antiquated Nokia phone, but yet the mother had the latest iPhone, but she couldn't use it. She was asking her daughter, who she is given a basically old phone, how to use her swanky new phone. So that shows you firsthand the imbalance that we have. Young people know how to use this technology. It's intuitive to them, but we give them old environments to work with, which is not acceptable in my regard. So anything that we can do to amplify your voice, to really keep that conversation front and center, because it's about how we herald in a new future that enables you to thrive. So thank you very much.
Do you want to respond to any of that?
The only thing that we really have to say is thank you very much for the kind words.
Okay, great. Right, Sharon, then Wayne. Can I just, sorry, I haven't got Stephanie here. I'm blind in this eye, as you know, so you might have to do a bit of air traffic control for me. Sorry, disability does suck. So I've got Wayne and Alex. Only sometimes disability sucks, I don't mean that. So don't think I'm ignoring you, that's what I'm trying to say. So I've got Wayne and Alex, is that correct? Sharon first.
Thank you, Jo. Yeah, I just want to echo what everybody else said, that it was a brilliant report. But I was at Strood Leisure Centre, Sports Centre, on Friday at the drop-in football there, and there was lots of young people there, and there was discussions with the football coaches that they weren't youth workers, and there was discussions exactly what Douglas was just saying, that the young people were far advanced than even the football coaches on when they were talking about games, and they were disclosing stuff and to the football coaches. So I just sort of like wanted, from your point of view, from a young person's point of view, what advice would you give to parents or youth workers that might be worried about young people accessing stuff that they shouldn't be accessing, and like a guideline? I mean, I remember in my day it was put your computer, it was a long time ago, I saw you smile, it was put your computer in the main room so you could watch what they were doing. Obviously that was long before we had like the little phones. So what sort of advice would you give that I can take back to them and make them more confident?
I think that the biggest thing is you have to listen to the young people and what they're saying about technology and being online, because the biggest thing is that if young people don't feel that they're heard, they won't then talk to the adults about issues that they are having. What is really good is that we found that in Medway, their view on too much screen time is lower than the national average by an hour, which is great. And we've found that a lot of young people are also thinking about the consequences of AI and harmful content, and also know how to report harmful content online. I think it was 83% of young people know how to report harmful content on TikTok and social media, which is amazing to see. I hope that answered your question.
It does, thank you. And as you say, that figure is a really good figure, because I don't know, even though I would know how to do that. So, but yes, thank you.
Okay, Wayne, then Alex. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Jo. Good evening, everyone as well. To echo what everyone said so far, it was a very good report. So thank you so much. And the research that went into that as well is clearly demonstrated and exemplified within it. Douglas and many others had mentioned about how young people are so much better at using technology than grey-haired old folk like myself, which is absolutely commendable, and it's something that we're going to have to live with as well. Within the report, there were lots of questions, and this is really something as a potential recommendation, because I'd like to see this develop and continue as well. I've got 2 young children, and in my professional life, I am spending an awful lot of my time now researching into AI and how we can use it and develop it for profitability purposes within the company and the business which I deal with. But my children are very, very concerned about the use of AI and the fear that youngsters now have in trying to get employment, because they're now competing against artificial intelligence. And I just wonder whether or not that's something that we could look at, consider as well, youngsters' thoughts on this, because so many at present are going through GCSEs, A-levels, and so the research is coming from that as well. But it's also competition for them moving forwards, and it is a genuine fear, I think, as well. So I just wonder whether or not this could be something that you could potentially investigate and see how that's going to impact on the young people's thoughts moving forwards going into the workplace. That was all I had to say. But great report, and thank you for your time. Cheers.
Well, definitely we will have to look into how this is going to affect GCSEs and exams in the future, because they're already talking about making exams on computer and not on paper. But what I found out that was really interesting about what Douglas was saying and what you were saying about young people being more sorry, being more sorry, being more know more about technology than adults do. I was talking to this group of this organization that works with young people with technology and making things with like VR and like 3D animation and stuff like that. And they were saying that actually most of the time we are just as illiterate as the old generation when it comes to technology. And actually it's more of the middle generation, so around 25, maybe younger, are more illiterate when it comes to technology. We only know the basics because we were pretty much taught from birth how to use an iPad or a computer or a laptop. It's not a skill that we harness. But I do know young people who do know more about technology than I do. But I just think it's interesting because I personally believe that young people can just be as unsure or clueless about what they're actually using than adults. But I just wanted to put that through.
I will say that young people as a collective are very aware of how AI is progressing within the job market and the detrimental effects that that is having on employment rates. There's a lot of concern from every young person that I've spoken to, specifically about artistic fields and also computer-based and mathematical-based employment jobs, due to how AI is much faster naturally than human cognitive capabilities within these fields.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. And may I just say it's a real honour to be part of this committee this year, particularly under your chairmanship as well. I know that we are on different sides politically, but I know that you are a great advocate for our children and young people in Medway. So thank you for what you do. Just on the report in general, and you've already really answered my question. I was going to talk more about the impacts of AI in the workplace. And I mean, you could do a whole conference on that alone, I think. And perhaps it's something to consider for the future, the impacts of AI on youth unemployment in Medway, particularly when there's 1 million young people across the country who are not in education, employment or training. And it'd be interesting to always get your perspective on that. So thank you for your report, and it's something to consider for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And we've got Leah, then Paula.
Hi. So I wanted to second everybody else's comments. I thought it was a really, really good report, well researched and well presented as well. It was nice, easy to read. But mostly around so I hear what young people are saying about not utilising outright bans of social media and instead focusing on education and the ways in which you can approach it safely. So the first one was, I wondered if you thought the council should be doing more to educate about screen time and social media and its impacts. And if so, what's the best ways to engage? I think that's that bit. And then this is me mostly picking your brains because I've got an 11-year-old who is just about to start secondary school. And some of the stuff in there about children using AI to do their homework, I wondered if you could tell me how teachers are policing that in schools and how teachers are, you may not know, but how they're able to ensure that children are still engaging with the content that's being taught. and whether you think it might actually lead to children being misbanded and being in the wrong sets and things like that. And then my final question was less for you guys and more for officers. There was a bit in there, a recommendation around procurement strategies and making sure that we've got green digital procurement strategies. I just wondered if we already had that in place. So I don't know which officer that would sit with, though.
Sorry. In response to your second question, so we found that a lot of teachers use AI for marking, as someone brought up earlier, but also I've found that a lot of lesson plans have been created by AI. I'm in year 11, and earlier this school year, all of my teachers were actually instructed to do a whole lesson on how AI can be used in that subject. So I think it's amazing that we're being educated on this tool, however, because it can be used for very good things. However, I think if schools don't want their students using AI for schoolwork and for homework, the best way to go about that is to teach them about the consequences of AI and that it's not 100% correct. And so I think it's that children need to be shown that AI is an issue and that it's not just this really good tool. And I think that, in my opinion, that's the main thing that needs to be focused on around AI in school.
Also, with AI, a lot of young people respond extremely well to rules that go both ways. For students to stop using AI within school, it's also going to have to be upon teachers. For at the moment as now, if you ask certain teachers for help with studying revision guides, they will actually recommend that you turn to AI for its ability to gather data. And so if teachers are using AI for marking schemes, then the most beneficial way for us to learn how to answer a question is going to have to be through AI itself.
Also, I think a lot of teachers are just tired. Back when I was in college, I think some of my classmates did a presentation, half it was written by AI, and the teacher knew, but she just kind of like pointed it out and went, maybe next time don't use this because obviously AI will say this and will do this, and it makes it very obvious. And now I actually have a teacher who uses it for images. She'll create images using AI and then she'll put them in her PowerPoints. And I was talking about how that insulted me in a way because I like drawing and I've made posters with my own art on it that I put on the wall, and they're right next to these AI images, these amalgamations of messed up looking humans, and I'm just kind of in shock about it. So I think teachers are aware, but they're just tired and they don't think it's, if it can help them plan, you know, lessons faster and do things faster, they'll use it no matter what.
So, yeah, just to clarify, I wasn't really criticising students and the use of AI. Like, I get it, I think it is becoming incorporated in all of our lives in different ways. I just wonder if within schools we've really looked at the impact it might be having on how much is fully absorbed and how much is just churned through it. So that's fine. Thank you, though, guys. Thank you.
Paula.
Thank you, Chair. So I would love to have a very long conversation about the use of AI in schools. However, I don't think we have enough time, and I want us to stay within our 3-hour time limit. I would say that obviously lots of multi-academy trusts have very different strategies and ways of implementing the use of AI. Some are particularly AI positive, and they will teach both, they will train their staff, and they will roll out programs on how to use AI effectively and with integrity. And I think the word is using it with integrity, both as a student but also as a teacher or a member of staff who supports the ecosystem of the school. That being said, I will not continue talking about AI for the moment, but I do have a couple of other questions. I loved the report. Thank you so much. It was great. I would love to have been at the conference, but unfortunately, my workplace, it makes it quite difficult to attend things like that. So my questions are, you had lots of students there, you had lots of young people. How did you make sure quieter young people were able to contribute to the conference? And also, how did you ensure that we had a real diversity of background in terms of the people who came to the conference? So just so that everybody had a chance to be heard during the day. That was the first question. The second question does have slightly to do with AI, which is, it's very easy to see when somebody uses AI, because if you know that person and you know how they talk, how they write, you know immediately that they've used AI, because a lot of the time they've just copied it down. But one of the questions I had is really thinking about your own educational environment. Some of you might be at university, you might be at college, some of you still might be at school. Should education establishments be teaching students how to use AI safely and responsibly? I don't think that we are at a position now where we can stop people using AI. But I think, what are your ideas around how do we do that in a safe way? And again, using the word with integrity. Okay, and then my third question is really about social media. Many young people know how to report harmful content, but they choose not to. Why is that? And what would make reporting more attractive to young people? Those are my questions. Thank you so much.
To answer your first question with how Senko children were young people were able to stay involved within conference, we dedicated a team of our members within council to specifically walk around those tables, who were able to understand how to communicate best with Senko children and make sure that they felt comfortable enough to share what they thought. We had members set up at every table throughout conference, constantly writing down every conversation had within tables as well. This way we were able to ensure even if a child wasn't confident enough to put up their hand and answer a question, their thoughts were still being written down. Secondly, with schools teaching about AI, we believe that it would be beneficial to start talking about AI within schools, about the pros and cons of it, both environmentally and within how it is used. But it's a very difficult topic to bring up due to its diverse abilities and how it should be regulated, because one person's opinion won't correlate with everybody else's. And so to find a healthy in-between that everybody can agree with will be quite difficult. But that is something that we are interested in figuring out as well.
In response to your third question, I got my statistics slightly wrong earlier. 82% of young people in Medway know how to report harmful content. But what's also included in that statistic is that the majority of them don't trust the outcomes. So let's say you're scrolling on TikTok and there's harmful content of some sort and you report it. One report isn't going to do anything. There needs to be multiple reports from a range of different people for the video or for the account to actually be investigated by the social media teams. Because one report isn't going to do anything, so many people think that, well, my report's not going to do anything, so I shouldn't report it. There's no point. However, it needs to be taught that you should report it, because if you see it as harmful, lots of other people likely will as well, and so it will then get looked at quicker. But yeah, so the main thing with that is that they don't actually trust that anything is going to come from them reporting it. Thank you.
To throw one more statistic in your face, with national average, 55% of young people do not feel supported by adults around them. We are actually 10% lower, sitting at 44% of young people feel supported by adults, leaving a majority of them feeling as though they don't have the support in real life to go ahead and report anything, as they don't have the adult support to feel confident enough to do it.
So thank you for those contributions. They're very thought-provoking. I think one of the things, the relationship about trust. So when you report something, you want it to be actioned. I think many of the platforms that we are using, we have seen that they have a deliberate corporate strategy of paring back things like their human rights departments, not investing in the kind of staffing that is required to follow up and have meaningful investigations into things. So I think it's a corporate strategy is one of the issues. However, I also agree with you that you need to report it. You need to continue to report it. Always, just because it's happening online. It's the same message. If you are sexually harassed in person, report it. If you are racially abused in person, report it. It's exactly the same if it's happening in social media. What happens in real life needs to be reported. What happens in virtual life needs to be reported. And that is a key message that adults have a responsibility to keep saying no matter what. I also wanted to pick up on your digital skills. I agree with you. I think a lot of young people, you wing it. You learn as you go, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have got great digital skills. It just means that you're really good at winging it at the end of the day. And I do think that there is a gap in terms of digital literacy in many, many schools. In many schools, you might get to access a computer at lunchtime, or you might get 1 or 2 periods a week when you get to go and use the IT that's available in school. Usually, it's really old. Yeah. So I would say that I thoroughly agree with you. Digital literacy is a huge issue for young people today.
One thing I want to add is that there are some companies, websites at the moment who are using AI to report and police sort of their platform. So there's also that, because AI isn't always correct, and they might flag something as completely safe when it's not.
Well, it's been well documented and well researched how misogynistic AI is. So I would suggest self-policing is not really a way forward, is it?
Okay, thank you. I agree with you. But I'd like to say thank you for answering the questions so eloquently. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move to the Vice Chair?
Nothing to add from us.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
So I think we missed when I asked about the digital procurement, the green digital procurement strategy. I don't know if anybody who's here tonight knows what our procurement strategy is when we are procuring digital services.
I don't sitting here, but I will find out.
It's fine. So just to say that I move that the committee notes the Medway Youth Council Annual Conference Report 2026 and the recommendations made as a result of the findings from the conference. And to say again, thank you so much for the report.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded? Thanks, Wayne. And is that agreed? Thank you all, and thank you. Okay, we're on to item 6, and welcome back, Steve Chalk. We're looking at Oasis Restore Secure School update, and I already mentioned the supplementary agenda.
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, we'd like to introduce our little team. So my name's Steve, and I'm the founder of Oasis. It's nice to see you again. Cheers.
I'm Claire, Chief Operating Officer for the Restore Trust.
Hi, I'm Lisa, Nurse Consultant for Children and Young People for Central and North West London. We're the health partner at the Secure School.
I'm Mo Arifalo. I'm Interim Head of Healthcare for Oasis Restore Secure School.
Great. So we've sent through the PowerPoint, as you know, lots of words on it. So we're going to deal with this, take you through this bit by bit as to where we are. And first of all, thank you for the chance of being part of that. Just listening in on the discussion just now about AI, which was great, really good. I guess you all know that, or perhaps you may not know the details, and it's all contained on one slide, which isn't a good place to put it in a sense. And we're not putting the slide up. I'm going to talk you through that slide in case you don't have it in front of you. But we'd like to talk about why we closed. We're soon to reopen, and we'll go on to talk about that. But first of all, we'd like to talk about our reasons for closure. And those were that in April 2025, last year, we as a trust decided to reduce the number of children that we could take at Restore. And that was because some of the internal doors had broken. It wasn't that the locks had come off, although that happened in some cases. It was that doors had actually broken in two or in bits. Those of you who are aware of school education, normal secondary school education, even some primary education, when you're working with children that are highly disturbed and can't regulate all of the time, it's not unusual for a door to be kicked. Sometimes it happens at home, doesn't it, to a child's bedroom door. And one child kicked a door, I don't think with any intent except utter frustration at his situation, and the door cracked and broke and therefore flew open. And that led to us discovering that the doors were not built to spec. They were supposed to be highly secure. Obviously, it's a secure school. But in actual fact, if you're interested, I can show you a picture of one afterwards on my phone. They, instead of being solid wood, they were in actual fact wooden veneer and chipboard or chipboard interior, much like a kitchen door that you might get from IKEA. Just they looked shiny on the outside. And once one had broken, then it made some of the other children dysregulated, obviously, because if you're smaller than a child that's much larger than you with a violent history, that's going to put you on edge. But what we did was we talked to Ofsted, who are our regulator in the end, not the MOJ. We are regulated by Ofsted as a children's home, and we have to meet their standards for health and safety and security. And so we asked them to come in, and they looked at the situation, and they agreed with us that if we reduce the number of children, which is what happened in April 25, if we reduce the number of children, then the number of staff we have with a reduced number of children could maintain safety for them. At the same time, well, before that, in fact, when this first happened in the February, when the first door broke, we contacted the Ministry of Justice, who were responsible for installing the building, installing the doors, getting the building ready for us, and handing it over to us for use. So we're the users of the building, not the builders of the building. And we told them about this situation. They came in April to see the doors, perhaps at March, to see the doors, and told us that new doors needed to be ordered, all of the internal doors, and that would be done by mid-May. There was no exact date, but the doors would arrive by mid-May. So with that in mind, and our staff buoyed up by the fact that this support was coming, there are two factors, aren't there, in containing situations in a secure school. One is that you've got well-trained staff, and the other is that you've got a secure environment. And unless you have both of those, you can't create containment when a child dysregulates. Some of these children, of course, they're children in law, they are very large children, you know, over 6 foot, huge children who've committed very violent crimes. So we continued with that, and May passed, and June passed, and July passed, and we were constantly in touch with the MOJ, Ministry of Justice, to inquire about when the doors would arrive, because then the doors had to be fitted, which is a long process. It's not like just fitting a front door. But it was in late July, as more doors broke, as our staff, or some of our staff, felt insecure and threatened because of lack of safety, and as some of our children didn't feel safe because of some of the other children on the site, and of course that dysregulates behaviour. We had a board meeting, Oasis board meeting, the board responsible for the secure school, and it actually took place on July the 30th. And we decided we took the decision at that point that in the light of the fact that the doors were constantly delayed, we needed to take decisive action because we were responsible for the children's security, and we were accountable to Ofsted for this, not to the MOJ for it. We were aware that if Ofsted came, they could accuse us of not being across health and safety, and they could shut us down. So we wanted to say to Ofsted, aside from anything else, that we did not feel this was a safe environment. And we invited them to come and look at the situation, and they agreed with us. And that allowed for us, having taken that decision and passed it to the Ministry of Justice, our decision for that, that was when the whole thing became a public matter, because shutting the secure school a year after opening it was a big newsworthy thing. But it's the only thing that we felt we could do, in all honesty. And we would have been shut down had we not taken the decision ourselves. And of course, what that did, the shutting of the school, it allowed us to slowly work towards placing all the children that were there, young people, children that were with us, in other centres, other centres of custodial care, which was a heart-wrenching moment for all our staff. Because if you come to Restore, which I hope you will at some point as part of this committee, and compare it with a young offenders institution, a YOI, somewhere like Feltham, you will see that it's night and day. It honestly is. It's extraordinary, the difference. The therapeutic centre, as opposed to anything else in the justice system, youth justice system at this moment. But that allowed for us to, in consultation with all our partners and with CNWL, and Mel represents them, our health partner, we all came to this decision together, and we worked with the Ministry of Justice for children to go elsewhere. And I think that decision proved right, because in early August, just after we'd made the decision, actually, in again a long conversation with government, the Ministry of Justice confirmed that they had not ordered the doors, which was a shock to everyone, including the minister, who didn't know this hadn't happened. It was they weren't coming because they'd not been ordered. And in a drawn-out discussion over the next month or so, we learned together that the new doors could not possibly be in place until after Christmas, last Christmas. So it proved to be a good decision. And the reasons for that decision, and then I'll hand over, are clear. I think I've talked about the biggest one of them, in one sense, already, that as a registered provider, the Oasis Restored Trust is accountable to Ofsted. And we're accountable to them for meeting the quality standards that are outlined in the Children's Homes regulations. And we knew that we couldn't. We just knew we couldn't. And the core reasons behind
Steve,
that.
could I just stop you there? I'm just
sorry.
mindful of the time. We're at 7:15, and I know my colleagues, they're really diligent. They will have read everything.
Oh, right, okay.
And they do have pressing questions to be asked.
Yeah, sure.
If that's all right. So if I give you 3 more minutes.
Yeah, well, I can stop there. If everybody's read everything, that's brilliant, and it's highly unusual. So that's brilliant. And so you would all know the reasons why we had to do this for everybody's safety. So now we come on to the future.
Okay, I've got a question from Paula. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I just want to start by saying that we're counsellors, we take our work very seriously, and I don't really appreciate a flippant point about reading our papers.
Okay.
So let's not insult us,
All right,
okay?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to be
Thanks.
insulting.
Okay, so I want to start by going to the heart of the issue, which is the inadequate Ofsted rating that the effectiveness and leaders and managers was given. So I'd like to know what steps you put in place to address the inadequacy of your leadership and management team.
Yeah, well, if I say talk about the first bit of that and then hand across, I think, to Claire for the second bit, the reality is that if you read the Ofsted report in depth, you'll realise that much of the inadequacy in terms of the leadership was to do with the fall away in confidence of leadership. So we knew as we opened up, because we'd been informed of this by the MOJ themselves, that as we opened and as we went through the first year, there were some staff, however much screening you had done, would prove unable
I'm not
to
talking
step
about
up.
staff, I'm talking about the leadership.
Yes.
The leadership inadequacy.
And that was part of it. In the difficult situation people found themselves, some of the leaders were unable to step up. That's what happened. We have addressed that situation. We were addressing that situation already. The substantive reason why we shut, as the report actually says, is the doors, but there were other reasons behind that that were an outcome of that. But we are working at that. Claire, I don't know if you want to comment.
Yes, I think the other thing at the time is we didn't have a registered manager in post, conscious this is a public meeting, and that individual is the Ofsted registered person for a secure children's home. And in our leadership structure, that's one of 3 roles. They weren't in post due to stress. So at that point, we actually had someone key person missing from leadership as well. Since then, we've recruited a new person into that role, and they're doing very well and have been working with us through the last year. In response to I suppose there's a why and then what have you done about it, and what have you done about it? So in the presentation, we tried to outline our key improvement areas there in quite a succinct way, and then the work that's gone on around then and the training that's gone in. Leadership at all levels, so I appreciate senior leadership team as one and the middle leadership team as well. And in the Ofsted report, there were a number of concerns raised around the experience and appropriateness of some of those middle leaders, and not to put blame on them at all. It's the hardest role in any organisation, as you know. So with the training that we've done with them since closure as well, has kind of tried to address some of that. Predominantly, I would say that fell in one team in particular, the residential team, not in the education or in the health team. So we've really targeted them to be able to support them as well. One of the things that's helped with that is the appointment of the new registered manager, who is their direct lead, who wasn't in place during the Ofsted inspection due to stress, as I said.
Paula, I'm really sorry, I've got can we come back to you? Is that all right? Thank you. Douglas, then Robbie.
Okay, thank you very much for the report. Very quickly, two things I need clarity on. The first one being around the ethnicity of some of the young people that you have there, just for my clarity there. You got 4 categories: Black, British, Caribbean, African, mixed, multiple ethnic groups, white, other ethnic groups. It reads like a hot mess for me. I don't understand it. So, for example, when we say mixed of or multiple ethnic groups, is that excluding white people? Because it's important to be very clear as to how, because it can read a particular way.
Yeah.
And as somebody that comes from the Black African background, one thing I must say, and say it rather candidly, it is shocking. It does demonstrate that we have a lot of work to do to address some of these horrific statistics and the root cause as to why that does happen. And also, lastly, in terms of the lessons learnt, one of the issues you have here is staff being over-familiar, not being able to maintain good boundaries with young people who are equally impressionable. They come at a young age, right? What robust things have you got in place so that there are boundaries between adults and young people? Thank you.
Good question.
On the ethnicity data, I felt the same myself, and I checked before we sent it. That is the data that we legally have to report on to the YCS, and so that's why it's like that, because our systems are reporting against those categories. So our data, our information system is built to then produce this data. I agree that it does exclude white. The mixed other does exclude whites. The labelling of that could have been changed for this, but internally, that's what we have to report on to the Youth Custody Service on a monthly basis. That's why it's designed like that. Yes. Yeah. Agreed, yeah. The whole of the youth custody estate is like this. That's why we have to report to it. Externally, we could change it. Yeah. Appreciate that feedback there, and we'll let them know.
Yeah, there are many things we have to do because the system requires us to do it. They're not always the things that we would believe to be the wisest, but it's the system, and you're required to do that reporting. In the second part of your question, some of the staff, I forget the terminology you use, being immature and over familiar with children. That was true. That is a problem across the whole youth justice system. In fact, across the whole justice system, it's recognised. What we have done, without trying to excuse that, we've got to work through that constantly. Some of it's to do with the staff that you can recruit and how big the market is, how many people are available. It's a tough thing to do, especially as there are 3 prisons in the area. So, you know, it's hard, it genuinely is hard to get staff in, which is something that we talk through with central government. But what we have done is we have used the closure time as effectively as we possibly can to train staff to a new level. It's given us time that actually we didn't have before we opened at the beginning.
Can I just build on that slightly to say that the boundaries piece particularly was around consistency. So we have a process. What we do is a process of consequences. We don't have sanctions or anything like that. It's consequences, natural consequences. What was often happening for the experience of children is that one child could do something in one flat and another child do something in another flat, and a slightly different consequence would be applied. Children are savvy, they're brilliant, and that they experience that as a lack of consistency with boundary holding. Over-familiarity was often then seen as, in the effort to build a trusted relationship, remembering you are the adult here, what information they know about you. You bring yourself to work, but within very strict boundaries. There were some very good lessons for us about what we trained staff on originally, how that played out in practice, and then we've reverted to that training through this last 10 months to address that. Some of that would have been iterative as a new organisation anyway. It was far more exacerbated in an environment that wasn't secure with the doors. But the training that's happened on that since has been delivered integratively. So some of our clinical psychologists from CNWL have worked on that with staff as well, and getting into the detail of that. We've reviewed processes around consequences and micro-scripting for staff to be able to give them tools to use so that there's consistency being experienced by children, and many other examples like that. Does that make sense, just to build on the boundaries piece?
Douglas, I'm really sorry because I've got such a list. Can I just clarify with everybody? Can we do one question? If you've got anything pressing other than that, can you send it in to Stephanie? And I'm sure Steve and his team will answer. Okay, Robbie, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I remember when you guys came the first time, wherever it was, and you were full of hope. And I remember learning that you guys were awarded significant additional resources from the public taxpayer to run this kind of experimental restore alternative to custodial prison, whatever the appropriate term is. I appreciated at the time it was very experimental and it was different, and you were very full of hope, and your faith guided you, etc., etc. Are you sure that this is working out? Because when you look at the Ofsted concerns, it's not just the case that the approach is slightly different. We're talking about things like restraint records incomplete and unrecognised holds used, safeguarding concerns not escalated, medication errors. Are you sure this is going to work out? Is it a case of that you were very idealistic and very well intentioned, but this is just not safe enough for staff to perform this vision because what they have to protect about themselves? Yeah. And how much more money is going to be spent on this?
If I answer the first bit, and I think Mel is the best to talk about the health concerns, etc. But there is a sense in which we have more money than a YOI. We get more money per child than a YOI. We get less money per child than a secure children's home. So we're kind of a halfway bridging point. The idea of the secure school was to try to aim at the quality of a secure children's home, which is much smaller and better staffed, a different ratio. So it was trying to do secure children's homes things, hit that standard and move on from a YOI, like a Feltham. So we're a midway point, in actual fact. The truth is, as well, and this is recognised by everyone, Claire and I were talking with the government minister about this just the other week, that what we're doing, to your point, is trying to do something therapeutic, lots of systems that don't work for us and get in the way very often of our engagement with children. So it becomes very demanding. Do you fulfill all the systems or do you work with the children? And to the point in case about you saying the wrong classifications of children, it's because that's what the system requires. So what I would say, for my part in it, is that you have to be in it and engaged in it to fight for change in the system, but you need a lot of change in the system. And I could bore you all stiff with lots of issues that surround us that are beyond our control, but that impact our operation. But because we are in it, we are working to get those things changed, not only for us, but for other parts of the system. And only this morning, I've been involved in a meeting and writing a paper and working with the Royal College of Psychiatrists to bring about changes in the system, the wider system, that will enable a more therapeutic approach. So I both agree with you that there's a long way to go, but in my view, whether or not we're running something like this, this is the best way of getting there.
Chair, I would just say in response to that if it was the case that the outcomes of these children were equal to what you see in a standard custodial holding custody arrangement, and the argument was that we need to do system changes or even greater funding so that you can go to where you want to go, I would understand that. But that's not what Ofsted have found. I mean, medication errors, but this is basic safeguarding stuff. I'm not sure everything being about an external pressure is necessarily the most realistic and appropriate thing. And how much more funding do you have to run this experiment before this chapter, let's put it that way, of what you're trying to do comes to an end?
Our task, once we're open again, which will be very soon, is to build on what's happened and continue that thing it's not about more money is not available. It's about having the opportunity of really working through the system. And again, I would say to you, just, you know, these are things I think they're on public record. I was talking with the judges bench at the Old Bailey. Many of the children who come to us have been tried at the Old Bailey or on remand to go to the Old Bailey because of the seriousness of their crimes. And at the judges bench, there are 15 of them there, they were saying to me just the week before last, the outcomes that they have seen in the children who've been on remand with us and have gone up for trial are extraordinary compared with what they normally see. So it's not true that we weren't making progress, and they as a group would vouch for that. In fact, we're going to run an event together where they will talk about the difference that Restore has made to the children that appear in front of them. But there's a long way to go.
Okay, thank you. Adrian next, then Mark.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Steve, for a very interesting report and what we've learned tonight. I'm going to take a slightly different tack with this. Having had in the past 2 visits to the old Cook and Wood facility, I was quite horrified at what I saw. And I think the statistics bear out that that sort of institution is merely just keeping children locked up. It's not doing very much to redress the situations that are with them. What I would like to know is how this mess up started in the first place. If I've understood you correctly, it was the Ministry of Justice that had the specification for the school, not you. I'd like to know, has the Ministry of Justice learnt from this mess up? Because this is a huge waste of public money. All the time that you've been empty, yes, you've used a lot of the time wisely by staff training, and I've been very, very impressed with that. But what I would like to know is, do you know what has happened within the Ministry of Justice to change this? I've worked my whole life in an industry that is very highly regulated, and in the shipping industry. So I'm used to having to work with regulatory bodies all the time. And you know, when we were building new ships or altering ships, we not only had the government body involved, we also had the classification society involved, and the ship staff and senior executives of the company all over the thing like a rash. And I think the great shame of this is it's not just the financial loss of public money, but when you read the child voice section there, you could see that, yes, you were making a good impression with some of those young people, and it really is a crying shame that instead of that work being able to continue, that people have had to go back to the old locked door syndrome and just locked in their cells to keep them out of trouble a lot of the time. So.
Thank you, Adrian. Is that your question?
Yes, I'd like to know what the Ministry of Justice have learnt from this.
They have conducted an internal review on the sign-offs and the role of the 3 significant players during the build programme. They contract out to a technical advisor. There's a company that did that, commercial company, as well as the actual main contractor. And then they have MJ Property, a department in and of themselves, and they are the people that run the project. In the Department for Education, when we build schools, that's a very dual role with the provider, guided by a generic design brief, which wasn't in place for this project. That's largely owing to the fact that the Department for Education and Ofsted don't have a design guide for building secure children's homes. What happens with secure children's homes is a specialist architect is appointed, and it is very bespoke and responsive in that situation. I believe that is being addressed for future. As regards to where does the responsibility and accountability for this sit within that triad that I've just described, that is something that the Secretary of State, the current Secretary of State, has taken up. We do ask questions around that, but as you can imagine, it's not always a transparent conversation. Their lessons learned around how they didn't use a specialist architect as secure children's homes do to ensure that the quality of the products being done and being put in and the specification was there, that has been learnt, and that role has been in place as we've put in the new doors in the last 10 months. So a specialist architect who works with Ofsted and specialises with secure children's homes has worked with us to do that.
It's also been discovered that exactly the same mistake was made 12 years ago in a secure children's home, where these same doors were fitted and broke in the same way. So there's an issue that's come into the inquiry about loss of organisational memory.
Paula, are you trying to say something to me?
I'm just trying to say, I do have one more question, if you don't mind adding it.
Okay, can I get the others first? Mark, then Shaz.
Thank you, Chair. Joe, Joe, I think the young person's going to want to ask.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you.
I've looked at the report.
Mark, could I put the young person first, please?
Yeah, that's fine.
I just wanted to ask, after the first failure, what action was taken and why were children kept on site if there were such significant problems?
The Ofsted, I'm not sure if this was clear in the report, that Ofsted came and did an initial visit with us to check that everything was safe and spoke to the children that were there. There was 10 of them at that time, and asked if they felt safe. And that was, it's a public report. And at the time there was agreed that they did, and that they felt safe and staff felt safe with a lower number of 10 children. So on that basis, we decided to stay open. And then after that, took the review again, after speaking to Ofsted again. So they did a monitoring inspection, it's called, in April, and you can see that online. And that was the output that kind of informed that decision.
And in the document, you've got all of that accounted for you to read. And there's also a quote from that report that sets that out from Ofsted.
Okay, we're now on time on this item, so can I just, for parity and fairness, ask that we vote for a 10-minute extension on this item, as we've got a number of questions. Those in favour of a 10-minute extension? Thank you. Those against? Democracy works. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Reading through the report, a number of major concerns, and seems a complete lack of accountability. Knew the doors were faulty in February 2025. We're in June 2026, and it's still not been sorted. That just shows an utter failure. And the original doors, I haven't got the figure in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it was well over £1 million to put them doors in, and it's probably going to do double that now, because knowing how procurement goes in this country, that'll go up. You've got 70 members of staff. Even if you're paying a minimum wage, that's over £2 million per year, and I'm pretty sure there won't be. And every day this is not open, you're spending just on staffing, without everything else, over £200,000 a month. That's just not sustainable. People are working hard to pay the taxes, businesses are paying taxes, and this all seems to be being wasted. What I really need to know is somebody taking accountability and have heads rolled for this utter incompetence?
This is to do with the internal inquiry. That we have to keep the staff on. We have to keep people on staff ready to open. We will be opening in the next, in the next week or so. We've reached the point where we have enough doors to open, not doors for the whole site, but for doors for one wing of the site, and we will begin to take children at an average of 2 a week over the next few weeks. But we had to stay ready for that.
So that's the staffing costs. On capital costs, that was all managed by the Ministry of Justice, as I've said. So the precise cost of that, I don't know either. That was an MOJ cost originally. Subsequently, we have bought the procurement in-house to be able to be as nimble as possible, to your comment about how procurement goes in this country. And that has sped things up. The reason for the delay was a procurement commercial issue within central government. And then we stepped in and said, can we find a way to do this? So we've done that. And we're doing it in 2 phases. Doors have been replaced in a residential block that houses 24 children and one of the education blocks. And we'll open that phase first whilst the rest of the work goes on and that gets replaced. The cost of that is, known to the Ministry of Justice, agreed. It is, the accountability for that is lacking on that side.
Okay, Sharon, then Leah.
Thanks, Joe. Just a quick one. You offered a visit again. This will be the third time I've asked whether I can visit, and we had emails on the first one, and the emails got lost, apparently, but I have proof that so this is the third time I've asked, so please can I see it before it opens? My second one is about training, and you say that you're doing training with autism and neurodiversity, but like Robbie has already brought up, there's problems with medication and restraining. So I'm really concerned about what this training is for these children with, or young people with complex needs. And also, you say about consistency, every child might need a different consistency. I've got 5 children with special needs. They all 5 of them have completely different strategies. And yes, they will think that one of them's getting away with something that isn't, but that's about boundaries. And you know, you said, oh, the children were very quick to catch on, but that's your job as a member of staff, not to change it. But which is what you said, we're changing it, and we're being consistent with everyone in the same consequences, but every child is going to need a different consequence, and they're going to have to learn that that's rather than you changing your strategies.
That's the formulation approach with each child happens upon their arrival. So we formulate around them. That's a multidisciplinary team around them that then pinpoints the strategies for each child. That's done over a 2-week induction period. When I talk about inconsistencies, I mean inconsistencies that adults can hold the same boundaries to a certain degree whilst also being bespoke. So what children were expressing to us is the degree of difference was too much, and I would agree with that. And so the training's gone in to bring in, look, this is how we work around, scaffold around the child, meeting their needs, but so they experience a consistent experience, regardless of whether they're in school or in the home and in the flat, and regardless of who's on shift. And naturally, adults are different as well, aren't they, in their approaches? So we've created a framework for how that sits in, which gives better clarity for staff on consequences, but it is not, if they've done this, every single child gets this. Apologies if I miscommunicated that in my previous answer. That formulation approach when the child arrives allows us to think deeply about what's gone on for the child. We use an approach called the 5 Ds for that, and we've retrained on that alongside with CNWL, again, clinical psychologists working with staff. And in the scenario-based training, we've actually got staff to role play it and practice it in, but obviously without children, we can't really test these things fully, but that's what we've done over the course of 5 weeks. With regard to attention to those children with neurodiversity, that training and the specialism provider from CNWL was there all along, and that's been redone through this time. I would say, and Mel, correct me if you have a different view, I would say that some of the Ofsted issues were definitely instances. There was one safeguarding concern that they saw that wasn't noted. I was there for the feedback and heard that. It was only one that they found. And meds admin training, I believe, I think it was 2, and it was to do with melatonin being delivered, I believe. So that a sleep medication to be able to support. That isn't something we take lightly. It's serious. It was reported to Ofsted at the time. Meds admin training, just to be specific about that, has also been revamped and completely retrained, and all staff have been given new competencies on it. And we took feedback from staff about what was the issue with the training in the first time. That's been done in the last 10 months as well. The issues with restraint, the provider that we used for restraint was a company. It was brilliant, really child first, really child friendly, and hugely supportive of children's rights. What it didn't do was provide the clarity and the confidence for staff, so we've actually changed our training provider for that, and the feedback from staff has been that it's equally as focused on being de-escalation, restraint as an absolute last resort, but the training around it, the holds, the physical holds, are very different and far less complex, and staff have come back saying they feel a lot more clearer and confident. Again, we can't test that until children arrive back. We don't believe in restraint first, but we do need to prepare staff to be able to do that in the eventuality of keeping people safe. So that's one of the huge things that we've done this year with training for staff, and that's just finished in the last couple of weeks. If there's anything else to add on, sorry.
Yeah, just I guess in terms of the children that we see with significant neurodevelopmental needs, we're really fortunate to have an in-house team of CAMS professionals. Essentially, you guys would probably know them best as, so incorporating senior occupational therapists, speech, language and communication therapists, nurses, psychiatry, psychology. So we've got a really, really good in-house team who can assess, treat, diagnose and provide really good support to the residential and education staff around how to really meet the needs of those children. So like Claire said, we've done a lot of that training in a very integrated way, really wanting to kind of help staff feel very confident across the piece, and no matter what sort of needs a child or young person turns up with, we know there are really, really high levels of neurodevelopmental needs in the youth justice population, far more than you see in any other setting, including in the looked after children population. So we want staff to feel very confident in being able to meet the needs of those children, and so that training has really kind of helped with that. The initial training we did before we first opened and the subsequent training as well, and that continued in-house day-to-day support with a healthcare team that are working sort of 8 till 8 Monday to Friday and 8 till 6 at the weekends to just really provide that increased confidence as we welcome children back shortly.
Leah, then Steve.
So I think you've slightly touched on the tail end of that, slightly touched on my question, but I come at this, so I know Robbie spoke about this as an experiment. I come at it from a slightly different angle in that, like, I was excited for it as a project. I do see it as just an exciting experiment in how we do use justice. And I'm still fairly hopeful that that can work out. But I really liked the child bits in there, but I felt like what came out of the Ofsted for me was actually around the staff safety element and them not feeling safe. And I didn't see any voice of staff or anyone talking about it. So I wondered, I'm assuming that's obviously because you've been closed and you haven't got that, but how will you assess that going forward? How will you make sure that staff are feeling safe? And then my other question was also, could we still have a visit? So I could, me and Sharon were like brainwaving.
The original one together.
Yeah.
We've changed the, I'm just trying to think what the system to call it, almost like our staff voice. When we have children's voice, you need staff voice. So we've changed that going forward. So first of all, we've got moved with a new union recognition. We're not a prison, so Prison Officer Association didn't feel appropriate and the staff didn't particularly want it. So we've gone with Unison as a first approach with that, and they're now in place. And the other thing we've started to do is have meetings for staff with our trustees before a trustee board so that they can speak candidly without any leadership team there. And they are on a rolling basis. So they get to meet with all different layers of staff, and it's not curated by leadership team. So it would be, if you want to speak to trustees, you can do that directly and unfettered, but as a means of getting that staff voice back. We also have an internal forum, and we are revamping that linked with Unison so that we can listen to staff voices. The group reflective practice that we offer is every 4 weeks currently, and that's still ongoing and has remained so through the pause. And the feedback loop from that's held with jointly between Oasis and CNWL has continued, and that allows us to understand that feedback loop and how staff are feeling and what their sense of confidence and safety is. In addition to that, we've just increased the leadership management training for line management supervision of all line managers. So they've received 3 days of training in that, and we've rolled out a new package of supervision that links with the DEAR model that I talked about with formulation. And so we've rolled that out as well. And then from an accountability point of view, I know this, I hope this doesn't sound tokenistic, but just really monitoring both the quality of the line management notes and what was being discussed, and then the frequency, which we do now on a weekly basis as well. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. So before Stephen, the young people want to come back, our youth council.
What do you plan to do if your retraining is ineffective?
If our training is?
If your staff retraining is ineffective, what do you plan to do?
The way that we would know if that's ineffective is, in fact, I was going to answer to your point earlier as well, is that we're inspected twice a year as a secure children's home. All secure children's homes are. So within 6 months, it doesn't have to be 6 months, it could be 3, will be inspected. And at that point, we will know where we are. So to your point on how much longer do you go with this, essentially, there will be, if we remain, I don't believe that we will, but if we were to remain in an inadequate position, then steps would be taken to review that by the Ministry of Justice, by NHS England and by Oasis and CNWL. So we will know about effectiveness within 6 months, and the feedback from the Ofsted inspection will tell us where. But our role as leaders is to identify that before they come. And so that whole process of continual improvement is there. And in the paper, the work that we've done to identify our improvement areas has been done and is constantly being assessed. The point at which that will be tested is when children come back. And then the Learning and Development Group will be meeting to assess that, getting feedback from staff and feedback from children. And every 3 weeks we have our training shifts where all staff attend a full day of training shift. And that is where we're addressing practice needs as and when it's emerging.
Two things. One, if training is ineffective, then having training sessions every 3 weeks would continue to be ineffective. And secondly, waiting 3 to 6 months for a report is a very long time considering you've got young people who are in desperate need of help. And 6 months is a long time for permanent damage to set in if they aren't able to get immediate help.
Yeah, no, absolutely, which is why Claire said that the 3-month report or the 6-month report is from Ofsted. So that's independent assessment of how we're doing and where we're going. But Claire also said that we assess where we are every day, not just every week. It's a constant thing as it was before. So we know where we are. And in fact, our relationship with Ofsted is such that we can be in conversation with them and what's called the YCS. The YCS is the youth wing of the MOJ, Youth Custodial Services. And our constant conversation is back and forth with them. So we have people in and out of Restore every single week, probably every day. There's an endless conversation between us.
Once again, though, no immediate action was taken until Oasis Restore did their analysis. Your internal systems don't seem to be capturing the majority of the problems that you're having.
I would say what the report says that you've all had to read is that we took early action, not because Ofsted told us to, or because the MOJ told us to. We took early action because we could see the issues with the doors that we'd been given that weren't fit for purpose. And so we limited the number of children coming in and then tested our decision against Ofsted and what they had to say about it. And they said this, for a smaller number of children, is a secure way of operating, because we didn't want to shut, because you get into the point about the waste of public money if you shut. But because the doors didn't arrive as promised and as expected, the situation became worse and it became impossible for us to stay open. So once again, we made that decision, as the papers say. It wasn't that the position was forced on us. We chose to make that decision. In fact, there was some resistance to it to begin with, but we knew it was the wise and safe thing to do. And in terms, Claire's also made this point, I think the papers make this point, that what happened was in the end, the MOJ couldn't procure the doors fast enough, which was a frustration to the government as well, the government ministers. And we were asked to step in. We had offered months and months before to do that, and we'd been told that our help wasn't wanted. But in the end, we were asked back into the room and we were asked to oversee that process, which is why it's happening now.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 4 people who want to ask their first question and 3 people who want to ask their second. We're already 20 minutes late. Are you happy to continue? Okay, Stephen, over to you.
Right, so obviously the site was previously, many years ago, the Medway Secure Training Centre, if I remember correctly. And so I visited the site 20 years ago with the then MP. And as we've been walking around the site, the first thing that was brought to our attention was inadequate doors and inadequate windows. So I'm not quite sure how things haven't been lessons learnt and how all these years later it was exactly the same error. So since you just made the decision to essentially close because of issues of the doors and such like, how confident are you in the fabric of the building? E.g., is it fit for purpose? Because, hey, we don't want to go through this again. And you suddenly say, well, actually, it was the windows that are not suitable.
Yeah. These guys are there every day, so they can tell you about the new doors. And
As I said, the specialist architect that's been involved in signing off the specification for the doors is coming from a company, is an individual of a company that currently works on the design for 2 other secure children's homes, one in London and one in West Midlands. He is also involved in existing secure children's homes, works very closely with Ofsted in that. So I'm very confident in his experience and professional opinion. He has signed those off. The doors that are in now, and you'll see when you visit, are just wholesale different from before. They look and feel much safer. I was concerned that they would feel too clinical or institutional, and whilst they certainly do look more so, they're not as bad as we were thinking aesthetically. They've also had rigorous safety testing that we commissioned with the MOJ, and we sent some of our staff up to test themselves with sledgehammers and so on and so forth. So it met the minimum standards for tap testing and things like that as well. And the lock mechanisms are used in prisons, so they're just from that supplier. So I feel confident that the specialists involved in quite a niche area have been involved in signing off the specification.
in fact, these are the doors that were fitted to the secure children's home where they had the faulty ones fitted. And that's how we discovered, in actual fact, that some of our staff went up to see these doors before we fitted them. And somebody happened to say to them, these doors haven't been breached in 11 years. But we knew that the children's home had been open 12 years. And so our staff asked, why do you say only 11 years? And that's how we discovered that they'd had the same doors as us for the first year and had to shut so that they were refitted. And you also have a very good memory, because I've also been told about Medway that it also had faulty doors. So it's a reoccurring problem. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Wayne, then Liz.
Thank you. Firstly, what Doug was saying about the ethnicity, you've got in your key 4 colours, and yet in the all students you've got 5. So what's the dark blue mean? But that's a side issue. I really don't know where to start. Paul and Robbie, Mark have all really expressed exactly what I can see, and considering the present situations and the consistent failure, that is the only thing I currently see. I was really enthused when you last came here and gave your oration to us all about what you was about and everything else. And I am personally bitterly disappointed with what we've seen, read, and now sadly even heard. And I thought there's some really good questions from the NYC, by the way. That needs to be recorded, I think. So I liked your last presentation. Paul and Robbie have also touched on the fact that the consistencies and the lack of consistencies, and the only consistency, as I say, is failure. And it was really one of the questions that was posed by the NYC member as well, in part. This is all about the children. Every single person, regardless of age, deserves a second chance. And that's really what Restore is all about. They want to give a second chance to people. I'm all in favour of that. Brilliant. I think you've let them down. Don't deny that. But those children that were first there and then had to be put into a young offenders institute, what are they feeling? Because they've been in your home to get restoration, and they've been kind of told what to expect and everything else. They were there for a short period of time, and then they're shipped off to a young offenders institute. I think you fouled them as well. I think it was yourself who said they were very impressionable, and I do believe that what's happened is just simply disgusting. And you said about confidence. I'm afraid I'm lacking in the confidence at the moment. And with regards to the doors, how we got into that situation is risible, to be honest. That's where I am, sorry.
So just in response to that, if that's a question, the reality is that it's not just that we're supposed to give these kids a second chance. We're supposed to give them a first chance. They've never had a chance. They're the kids that we lock up in this country. They've never had a chance. So we feel that very, very passionately. We have fought for those children. In actual fact, I guess this is true of us all. I've stayed in touch with some of the parents and some of the children. In fact, I was invited by one of the children that was with us to their birthday party just last week. So we have stayed in touch with them and we have cared for them. And if you talk to them, they will not blame us for the failure of the system. What is our responsibility, the bit in it that is our responsibility, is ensuring that all our staff produce consistency, which is what we've been talking about here. And we have had some staff who've not been able to produce that consistency. We've had many strong staff and some staff not so strong. We were, as I said earlier, told that that would happen, whatever we did, by the very man actually who invented the system, Charlie Taylor. He told me that you'll lose 50% of your staff during the first year, whatever system you put in for interviewing them, however complex it is, because that's the experience within the system. But that is our responsibility, and we have doubled and doubled and doubled again our recruitment and assessment processes, and we've used this time for training. So the reality is we're as devastated as you are about this. There is much of it that is way, way beyond our control. But I agree with you that it's a waste of public money. It's horrendous to be put in the situation where public think that we have any control over those systems. But we are here to do our best for these children. This is not a pilot, by the way, and it's not an experiment. It is the way forward for youth justice because it is therapeutic.
Okay, thank you. Liz, then Demo.
Thanks, Jo. And thanks very much for being here this evening. I appreciate it's not an easy one. I know the first time round, I think we also gave you quite a difficult time because we had some concerns about what was coming forward. So I appreciate your introduction and explanation around the doors, which was a totally unacceptable, inappropriate situation, and the Ministry of Justice needs to be held accountable for that. But I see it. I just don't see how going forward. Are they going to be still responsible for estates? Because I'd have thought that is something that was within your remit of being able. If you've got a broken door, you should be able to pick up a phone or go on the internet and order a new one. Yeah. It's unacceptable that you're having to wait for someone else to deal with that. And I don't know how that was in that situation in the beginning, because they're clearly not able to handle that. And you were talking about sort of using this time to sort of train staff for sort of when you reopen, but I sort of understood that you actually had quite a bit of time at the beginning, when this whole project was coming forward. It wasn't just an overnight opening. There was a lot of time to train staff, and and I appreciate, Steve, your comments about you were warned that you will lose a lot of staff in the first year, but it's like opening a hospital, isn't it? You can't open a hospital on day one and have new staff.
Liz, can we have your question, please?
Yeah. So I just want to know, aside from the doors, because I think the Ofsted report shows that there was so many other concerns that we've talked about tonight, that the doors were just not simply the only problem. So I just want to know, when you reopen in a couple of times, what do you feel that the main failings were, and how confident are you that that has all been addressed and that you're going to have a successful, safe environment for not only the children but the staff that work there?
I think three things. One is that middle leadership team layer. And by the way, that isn't a blame. That is about equipping them and enabling them and providing them with the clarity they've needed. So we've invested in that, as I've said, with that middle leadership team in particular. They are our shift leads on a daily basis, and providing them with coaching and support from the senior leadership team with a new registered manager in post. The second thing, and I please, I realise I'm repeating myself, but the boundaries and consistency piece, what that looks like, training on that has happened over and over. And the third thing I would say is systems. I mean management reporting systems with 3 different systems, one that works towards what the MOJ require from us, one that works towards what the Children's Home Standards are. We've refined all of that and tried to bring it together so it's clearer and simpler. And that really helps with record keeping, quality assurance, and going through our QA cycles on a weekly, monthly, 6-weekly basis. And then retraining on that and the scenario-based training this time round. One of the things that I think, and Mel may come in here as well, that was different between the first set of training and this, and I completely agree, that's a very fair point, we did have that extended time, almost too much time without children that first time. People were dealing with things in conceptual basis, so it's classroom-based teaching, almost on theory. The benefit of having been open is that all the staff there, bar I think 3, maybe 4 new staff that have joined in this pause period, were all there to talk about what happened with children. So this time round, it's been role play based, scenario based on that experience. So it helps us build and develop, not talk from a conceptual base. That has the feedback from staff. We've done feedback on the training as time's gone. That feedback has come through loud and clear that they have felt that's equipped them far better to be able to move forwards. I don't know that we could have anticipated that at the beginning. I wish that we could have done, but we didn't. So that's been a key difference this time. Does that make sense to answer your question on the training piece? And the estates. So MOJ are still the landlord. We have a lease with them, so they're responsible for any kind of capital failing. We have a £5 million capital refresh over 5 years. That's all. So this time we've had to go to the MOJ for the additional funding, and where that's required in the future, should something happen again, I can't anticipate what that might be, then it would be them. Maintenance, so day-to-day maintenance is our responsibility as the leaseholder, but they are the landlord still.
Okay, thank you. So we've got Demola, Paula, Douglas and Robbie. Can you make your questions succinct and to the point, please?
Thanks, Jo. So before Oasis partially closed, clearly there was a safety issue, which I think most of my colleagues have touched on, against staff and children. I think what's not particularly clear in this presentation is how you, as the number of children increase, how are you planning to prevent assaults, disorder and weapon making? I don't see anything in this report that tells me it's going to be a safer environment for staff and children.
I think by its very fact that weapon making was happening as a result of often doors being kicked through and then parts from those doors being used. So that reduces the number of articles that you can use to make a weapon. That will significantly improve things. Weapon making wasn't a problem for us until the doors started to be kicked through. There was a significant increase in that. Preventing assaults is obviously the relationships with children and that consistency of practice and being able to understand the children through the formulation approach. Again, when we were first open for those first few months where we didn't have issues, that was working quite well, not without teething issues as you might expect, and the learning from that was there. That is absolutely critical. So obviously children will experience dysregulation and act out sometimes because of that. But certainly we're hoping to see that reduced. And the other thing that we've done is the training on the restraint training and de-escalation training. We done that with a new provider. And again, the feedback from staff, haven't tested it yet to be tested with children coming back. The feedback from staff has been unanimously positive in confidence building around that, and they feel very hopeful from that perspective. Our kind of prevention approach with weapons, contraband, anything like that, visitors coming in, how we manage that is exactly the same as before. We've redone training on it and we've double checked our training with other providers in the secure estate as well. Those processes were there and were very good, and they're very rigorous. That's tested by our Reg 44 visitor as well. So we have a monthly visit from Reg 44, who is someone, we've changed that provider for us. They come from Secure Children's Home background and they've gone through that as well in the interim. Happy that we, as I said, once open, those things are really where it becomes, we feel we've done everything that we can and it now needs to roll out when children arrive back.
Yeah, could I add to that answer? I think there's an important principle here that I'm not, well, let me just set it out. The reality is that in YOIs, some of you who visited them will be aware of the expression, the 23-hour bang up. Because what happens is kids spend an enormous number of hours in their cells. That's what happens. The experiment, if it's an experiment, is to change that and work humanely with children. So we were opening, and we will open again, in a completely different thing. Within the justice system, people have said to me, why don't you just lock them up? But that's not what we exist to do. We exist to do something else. And kids will fight, and they will fall out, because kids do that. The second thing to say is that the numbers of children in secure establishments has reduced dramatically, as I'm sure you'll know, even in the last 5 years. It's down to around just under 400, I think, at the moment. But every single one of the children in custodial care now is highly, highly complex and a danger to themselves and to others. So by running an open environment instead of doing the 22-hour bang up and that level of complexity, we're genuinely doing something that has never been done or attempted in this country at this scale before. In secure children's homes, you'll get a small number of children. And that is the complexity of what we are trying to work through. It is tough. It's really hard. We are working at it. We are not letting these children down. We are working every day in a new situation. We're learning. It was said to me by someone high-ranking in the Ministry of Justice that if you open, this is their illustration, not mine, so I'm not trying to trivialise it. If you open a new restaurant from scratch, what you do, I think his family had experience in this, is after 4 or 6 weeks, you shut it down for a little bit because you realise the fridges are in the wrong place, or you need more tables, or whatever you do, and you reset. But we set off with a theory and with training in theory, and were plunged into a reality that no one's worked in before in this country, with systems around us that
Steve,
don't fit what we're doing.
Can I?
But it's just so that you know that. That's not a defense.
We had the presentation before and
Yeah.
read the notes. Thank you. Sorry, before Paula comes, can I ask Louisa, who wants a question?
Thank you. In the spirit of keeping our questions in the spirit of press at once. Apologies, this is my first question. And in the spirit of keeping this succinct, could I just have a yes or no answer? Because we have already expressed our concern about the reporting of ethnicity, and just a yes or no. Can you take that back and address the reporting of the ethnicity figures in your, thank you. The second one is with regards to faith and cultural identity to be more visible in children's plans. Can we have a yes or no as a panel, the reassurance that it will be actually central to the children's plans? There seems to be an emergent thread here, and obviously representing the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Suffolk and the awareness about what has come through your reports with regards to cultural identity. We just need reassurance that the next time that those are central to your plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Paula.
Thanks, Chair. So the reality is that Oasis Charitable Trust bears the legal and high-level responsibilities for the systemic failures at Oasis Restore. That's the reality, if we're talking about reality, which you've mentioned a few times. So my understanding is that to support the schools' therapeutic Prison 3 ethos, the Ministry of Justice installed the doors that we've been talking about quite a lot tonight to facilitate free-flow environment. Excuse me, I'm talking right now. You
not
just
free
listen.
flow
No,
environment.
just listen.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
You've had plenty of time to talk. We're scrutinising you at the moment. I specifically remember you emphasising the experimental approach where prisoners, which they are effectively, could move between different parts of the centre. So, and you mentioned that quite a few times when you came to this committee the last time. So this evening, I hear
Oasis Charitable Trust place a great deal of attention that externalises structural blame, flags ongoing recruitment crises, blames some of its staff, and says that there may be targeted leadership turnaround strategies happening behind the scenes. I'm going back to what Ofsted has said. It basically said the effectiveness of leaders and management is inadequate. You have not replaced your core leadership team. You have not replaced your middle management team. You have kept them in place. And I get the argument about continuity, but I have absolute no confidence, and you need to reassure us that the exact same leadership team is capable of driving this improvement plan and the cultural change that's going to be needed. Because I have absolutely no confidence that you're going to be able to do that next week. So you need to reassure us that if the same leadership team and the same management team are in place, that we are not going to have the same mistakes happening again.
Which one of you are answering that question?
Well, if I begin and then hand over to Claire for some details, it's not the same leadership team. It's a developed leadership team, which we have said this evening. So leaders have left us, leaders have come to us. That's developed. If I ever am recorded of saying that this would be free flow, I don't remember that, and I don't think I would have said that. What I can't. I'm not even acquainted with that phrase. What in actual fact happens is the differences in Restore. People have bedrooms and they have lounges and they have flats, but they are accompanied around the staff.
Can you answer the question? Because we've been there, some of us.
Yeah, lastly, there are things that Oasis is responsible for, and I think we've owned up to those. We have owned up to those. There are things that we're not responsible for, and even in the reports that have come out, the MOJ made it clear publicly that these things were their responsibilities. So there are responsibilities that are ours, and there are responsibilities that are theirs, and all of that is in the public domain.
Yeah, it's not the same leadership team, so we've definitely re-recruited to that. So there are some people that are the same and some that are new. Yeah. One person is still there. One person was on maternity leave and she's come back, so she wasn't there before, but she wasn't there before. So, and she's come back, but she wasn't there before. So she wasn't there when we were open. So one person's still there, new registered manager, and the principal has left. And then the middle leadership team is 50% the same, and 2 new people from off the top of my head.
Thank you. And Douglas.
Thank you, and I find it rather fortunate I have to do a comeback, but I have to do that. I want to establish if your vision truly matches your ambition. Something that we done here, cross-party working as well. It's Carers Week. We recognise carers as people who've gone through the care experience as being a protected characteristic before the Equality Acts even asked us to do that. So when you're talking about ethnicity and say we have to record it this way, knowing that it is wrong and inaccurate, adding colours that are not consistent across the whole board shows to me that you're not actually thinking about the ambition side of things. You want things to be great, but it's the detail, it's the quality of the data that we can scrutinise, and that's what I expect to come back from you. So I want specifically in terms of the mixed section there and the additional colour, that rectified, what does that mean so we can come back and apply interventions to that. Second one is about medication. As a clinician, I can tell you, and this to Rob and Shaz's point, it's serious. You create 2 victims. No nurse goes to work wanting to give somebody a medication error. That young person might have received medication that was not for them. The environment might not be conducive to administer medication. And on top of that, some of those nurses might be struck off because of a medication error, because you have not provided a safe enough environment for them to administer medication to some very vulnerable young people. So I would want, as a comeback, a report in terms of specifically your medication management regime to ensure that medication is administered in a safe way. Thank you.
Shall I come in on the medication element first? So just to say that in at Restore, which is the model applied across all children's homes, secure or open, it's the residential staff who administer the medication. We're trying to create an environment that's as close to home as possible in that regard. So rather than nurses coming and delivering medication, most of the kind of day-to-day medications are delivered by the residential staff in twos, with training provided from the healthcare team, and they have access to our medication systems all through the appropriate information governance kind of structures. We've enhanced the quality of some of that training based on the feedback from the staff. I think it's fair to say that we had initially a group of residential staff who were very anxious about administering medication to children, and trying to help alleviate that anxiety and develop confidence is something that we've done a lot of work on between the healthcare team and the residential team. And we take that incredibly seriously. We've got really strong, robust oversight and scrutiny of that from our head of pharmacy within Central and North West London, from NHS England Pharmacy Department, who also kind of ask lots of questions about that and have supported us in our improvement plans around that. We've got a really robust competency sign-off framework for staff when they, so residential staff when they're starting with us, attending training or going through some medication competency framework with our senior nurses within the healthcare team, and then are deemed safe or not to administer medication to children.
Sorry, I'll come back. That's not what I was asking. Your job is to create a safe environment for the administration of medication. So, for example, if it's flagged up in the report that there are SUI, serious or untoward incidences concerning medication errors, you're not providing a safe enough environment for that medication to be administered. It could be because it's a noisy environment, staff don't feel capable, competent to do the medication, they're doing it at the wrong time. These are things that you need to come back to this committee with an answer to that, not verbatim now, but I want to see before and after a difference in the instances where medication is administered incorrectly. Then those figures should show a downward trend when you open.
Yep,
Thank you.
We can do that.
Thank you.
I think it was two.
It was two
there was
incidences.
2 incidents of it, so we can definitely do that.
2 is too much when you get struck off as a nurse.
So when you're saying, just giving that context to be able to say, so when we give an in-depth report, hopefully what we're saying is that for 2 it should be 0.
Yeah.
But perhaps we can unpack. And I appreciate your point there about the environment. Really good point. Noise, concentration, focus. 2 staff that did it told us immediately. They think, I think I've made a mistake. They felt terrible. But there will be conditions around. Okay, well, what was going on for you? There was a tiredness, noise, that sort of thing. Really valid point. So we can bring that back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Young people, then Robbie.
This has already been touched upon already, but your lack of diversity within your admission forms, not only are these children now being moved into your facilities during the most difficult times of their lives, your inability to be able to recognise the differences between them is appalling. They're being stripped of their identity purely just through admission forms alone. You've covered in African diversity, but you've got absolutely no European, no Asian, there's no options within these forms, and you're stripping them of their identities before they even have the opportunity to walk through your front doors. And that can cause a lot of personality problems within the inability to feel like them true selves. Do you plan to change your admission forms or anything?
If I can answer that question, I think the staff, Claire and Mel, their job is to report to the MOJ, the YCS, et cetera, in the terms that the categories we're asked to report in. Our sin in this situation is to have given you the figures in the way that we have to turn them out for those who assess us. I can absolutely say that the staff on site don't make a mistake between ethnicities or backgrounds or colours, et cetera, of any child. That the staff on the site, I'm not on the site all of the time, I'm not there. I have a wider job, but the staff, Claire and Mel and all the staff that work with them know these children and care for these children. And that's why, even in spite of all that's happened, they have stayed in touch with us, because we become an anchor point in their lives, because they're known and seen and felt secure with this staff. But the mistake we've made is we've given you the figures that we have to report to the officials. We will provide some your own figures next time.
Those categories don't represent what's on the admissions forms. They're the categories we have to report on. Perhaps it might be helpful for us to bring that back here and share that as an example of what is on the forms. It's basically the first page of our Restore plan for each child, and I can do that as evidence if that's helpful.
Okay, that would be great. I will write to the Ministry of Justice on behalf of this committee and also our local MPs as well.
We'd be grateful.
Robbie.
I think sometimes, Chair, despite the best of intentions, things don't always work out. I'd like to know how much money has been spent and paid for all of these staff when there's been no children in this home, in this facility. I think the experiment, which you did describe to me as an experiment last time I saw you, and you did mention about free flowing, you mentioned about playing ping pong and all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
You can look it online, it's recorded, so you did say it. I don't think this iteration of your vision has been successful. I think it's dangerous. I think it's placed children at risk. And I feel very uncomfortable with the way this is going. To the extent where I don't think, and I think the admission of changing of the doors to a prison grade door is indicative of the issues. Kids wouldn't be smashing down the doors if the therapeutic Oasis approach was successful, okay? I think, though, that in order for this experiment to continue to its next phase, which I think is probably going to be a balance between more safeguarding, more consistency and more boundaries versus the Oasis vision that you have, I think, Steve, you should resign. Because I think you're so passionate and so committed to this. I don't think it doesn't matter what people tell you. I think you can't see past it. I think you're a lovely guy. I love your Christian background as a fellow Christian. I think the good thing to do is to let this evolve into a different approach, which is maybe not what you originally started out at, but is still an improvement that ultimately could change the country for the custodian of children around the rest of the country. It can't be an Oasis, perhaps.
Where's your question, Robbie? Can I have your question,
my question
please?
is how much money has been paid to all the staff since the children have not been there? And Steve, will you resign?
Well, I'm the founder of Oasis and I can't resign from that. And I'm not on the staff of Restore. Secondly, it's not my vision, it's the government's vision, it's Charlie Taylor's vision, and we're putting it into practice and we're learning about it as we go. Thirdly, we need a new vision in this country of care for children. And again, I say to you that the children that have been through, even in spite of all the terrible things that happened, and they are terrible things that have happened, I can't put you in touch with them, but I can put you in touch with their parents.
But with the whole thing with boundaries, getting invites to people outside the system to birthday parties, that is not an appropriate, that's really concerning.
What's this?
You cannot set an example to staff where you get invited to former people in your system's birthday parties after they've left the system.
No.
That is completely inappropriate.
Forgive me defending the point. It's not inappropriate if, and because we checked all this through, when a parent chooses to stay in touch with you, because we become the secure point in their future. And all of this is done transparently.
Thank you. Robbie, it's all about relationships, and as people with experience know, it's not safe to lock children up 23 hours of a day. Everybody deserves a second chance, that's also been said, and actually they are children at the end of the day, and we know lifelong people I were in care with have got revolving doors to Belmarsh, and that's I'm the exception, and that is a tragedy. So if this works, it will be making a difference. Thank you. Vice Chair.
I move that we note the report and that we credit the scrutiny that's come from NYC. I think this is not the report, and the input that we've had is one of the best meetings we've had.
I'd like to ask that that Restore contact Stephanie to arrange a visit for anyone who wants to go as ASAP, as it's the third time it's been on the agenda. That Douglas's point of medication incidences, where they were, where they're going, takes place, and that you empower me as chair to write to the Minister of Justice and our local MPs with our concerns over ethnicity. Thank you. Thank you very much. Obviously, we've run over, and I think a lot of that's my fault, because I shouldn't have let you present, Steve, because we had all read the reports. So let's get on track. Oh, flying through this. Is that seconded and agreed? Agreed. Okay. Right. Oh, I'm not going to cry at this bit, but we've got Nancy next, and it's going to be her last time at our committee. And as always, I know you've read her thorough report, and we're all going to miss her. So, questions, please. Is that going to be okay, Nancy? But before we go to questions, can we just introduce Bex? Have I got that right?
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. This lovely lady here is Bex Reynolds. She's the Director of Safeguarding for Kent and Medway ICB, and is here to support me this evening and take back to the Chief Nurse and execs any actions that you might require of the ICB.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Nancy, I know over the period you've been with us, I've given you a load of grief at the failings on the initial health assessments, and especially outside the area. I want to thank you for everything you've done and your open honesty and showing that you care and taking responsibility for actions that weren't actually yours, but the department you worked for. All I would ask is that I hope that we get somebody as caring and responsible as you going forward, and maybe they might actually regret letting you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Adrian.
Nancy, I'd certainly like to echo my colleagues' thoughts there, which I wholeheartedly endorse. One of the things that we've been worrying about is the late requests, which have been responsible for a large percentage of the breaches. Could we have a little bit more of an explanation, please, of of why we're getting these late requests, and also as your leaders, could you be honest to say, has the cut of the ICB funding affected the ICB's monitoring of these sort of delays?
Thank you. I'll work with Nicoletta on the answer to your question about delays in requests. When a child, as you know, when we bring a child into our care, it's quite a difficult time, not just for the child and the family, but also for the social worker who is responsible for ensuring that it is done sensitively and legally, and requires an awful lot of planning. So there's a lot of stuff that happens right at the beginning of a child's care journey, one of which is the initial health assessment. You would have seen in the report that we've recently done a deep dive in and actually unpicked some children's pathways of those children who breached the timeline. And we have now got an action plan which is being drawn up, and it actually showed some of the difficulties around children that we bring in under a voluntary arrangement, section 20, and the difficulty of getting consent for to be seen by health at the time when the child is brought into care. And I know that Nicoletta is looking at that quite closely as how to address that. I have to say that that is a problem not only for Medway, but for other local authorities that I work with or I have been asked for advice on. This is a difficult time. But there is a recommendation. I know Nicoletta will be working with her social workers and the admin teams on how they can address the Section 20 difficulties. And I think that will take out of the late request quite a significant proportion of that. There are other issues that also compound that. If a child is if it's a baby that's in hospital when the request is due to be made, we won't see a child for initial health assessment or a baby if they are still in hospital. We need them to be at home with the foster family or wherever it is they're being placed, so that we can look at them as a holistic child or baby going into the community, and how we work with them after a discharge from a hospital stay. So there are other things, but the Section 20 does seem to be the difficult one in respect of late requests. Nicoletta, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Just to reassure, I think, members of this Overview and Scrutiny Board, that we have quite robust processes in place. We have our monthly meetings between our business support colleagues and colleagues working in the health service, just to look at how we can strengthen this. But I think what Nancy raised in terms of the Section 20 is a real challenge for us, because ultimately we're waiting on the parents to sign the forms for those to be passed on to our health colleagues for the appointments to happen. But I think, just anecdotally, I've just looked at our data from March onwards, since we've had the deep dive and we've reviewed what our weaknesses are in terms of passing the information on to our colleagues in health, and there have been a few exceptions where there's been a delay. So we are expecting that performance to improve going forward.
Okay, thank you. I've got Adrian, then Leah. Oh, sorry. Leah, then Robbie. Sorry.
So again, to second all of the thanks to you, I think not just here, but on corporate parenting, you're always so on the ball with things, and we'll miss you. And then Adrian took my other question. So this one is just, there's talk in there around a tool for data collection. I wondered if there was a way to make that marry up to other ICBs, because so much of the issue in having these completed in 20 days seems to be, or for the out of area children, that is, it's relying on those ICBs. So I didn't know if there was a way to make those match.
So thank you. The data tool it talks about in the report is around collecting information from an IHA to help us understand the health profile of our children, which is something that we'll be working with KCHFT around, because we don't have that detailed information. We collect significant amount of health information at initial health assessments and review health assessments, but the moment it's kept on the child's file and is used to improve the health outcomes for that particular child. If we want to have an understanding of the health needs of our children and build a profile so that we can commission more appropriately with the limited resources that we currently have, all of us, both social care and health, we need to understand what it is that we need to have, what we need to buy. I don't think we have that in the way we could at the moment. And the information's there. It's sitting there. We just need to work out with our colleagues how we draw that out and then use it going forward to commission appropriately. You and I have had conversations in corporate parenting about children placed out and the difficulties we have with receiving health teams. And as you and I have talked about before, it is a national issue. Where we can, if children are placed just over the border, and I'm not talking about Kent, I'm talking about, because obviously Kent and Medway sit under our commissioning arrangements, but if it's just over the border in one of the London peripheral boroughs and things are tricky for the receiving health team, we will bring them just over the border and we'll see them with our own teams. But those that we place further out, it is difficult, and we do escalate to the ICB who commission the services that we're asking to see our children. And the expectation is that they will look at their commissioning arrangements and work through their capacity needs. So it is a constant in our communication with other areas. Some ICBs are really good and they commission really well. And I have to say that we have a team that we commission that don't differentiate between those children that belong to Medway Local Authority and are placed in Medway and those children who are placed in with us, because it's not the child's fault that they are placed in a different area to their local authority. So I have to say that we've got it right. It's about trying to impress on other ICBs about their commissioning responsibilities, I have to say, and statutory duty. And it is an ongoing conversation that we have.
Robbie?
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point of order initially, be careful. There is a leak from the roof. It's very minor, but I don't want someone to slip and injure themselves. But just so everyone's aware, it's over here. I've never called for someone to resign from any position ever before. And I don't tend to make a habit of it, so please don't worry about it. Yeah, right, well, there we go. I actually second the comments made from the other side about the way you've conducted yourself. I think you've been very, very good. My question follows on about the difference between, you just said a comment about how people treat children if they're out of area or not. You wrote on page 48, I think internal page number is 6 of your report, that there's been an increase in the number of reports that have been returned to completing health team due to poor quality information and or incomplete analysis. The persistent underperformance has heavily impacted the overall IHA position. Why is that taking place, and what is the reason why that this, to me, I mean, I understand the issues with capacity and money. Everyone talks about it all the time, but this points to something perhaps different.
This talks about quality. So we obviously have the ability and responsibility to ensure that our paediatricians who see the children who are placed in or live in Medway, that they are trained to a standard that we would expect to see. So when an initial health assessment is completed, it has to be done by a doctor. And the majority of that is done by a community paediatrician. So in Kent and Medway, we have the ability to be able to ensure that our community paediatricians have the understanding, the knowledge and skills to provide a really high quality standard report. When children are placed out, we request the report from the receiving health team. We don't have the ability to ensure that those doctors are trained to the standard we would expect. So we are finding that we are receiving completed initial health assessments from out-of-area teams where they are not of the quality that we would expect and the quality that will make a difference to the health needs of our children. When a health assessment is done by an external team, they are sent in to currently our designated doctors or doctor to quality assure. So she will go through them to ensure that the information contained in that report is going to make a difference to the outcomes for that child. What we're seeing it's not all teams, but some teams, the quality is poor. So she will go through it, and if she's not happy with it and she can't find out the information herself, then she will return it. So we can't then circulate it back to the child social worker because we've had to return it to the clinician who's undertaken the assessment and ask for them to amend the report. We have to wait for it to come back again. It is terrible, and there are 1 or 2 that we've had to send back 2 or 3 times. The impact then, of course, is that it breaches the timeline and it has an impact on the stats. But what I have to say is that these are government-directed timelines, and while I absolutely understand it because we don't want drift, I get that completely, I think we have to have a report that is going to make a difference. If we start thinking, actually, that's okay, we'll let that go, then we're not putting the child at the centre. And it's a slippery slope to just actually tick in the box of the performance rather than thinking, okay, this child's going to breach, but I need to have this information because their future health needs to be informed by the information we get now.
Chair, I agree wholeheartedly with Nancy about the quality of report and the fact that it's so important that the quality is there to make a difference in these children's lives. I wonder through you, Chair, given that this is pointing to underperformance elsewhere, perhaps there will be a pattern or repeat offenders that they may be aware of. Is there not a function through you, Chair, through this committee, through an officer functionality where these underperforming areas where they're coming from can be reported to those local authorities or the health bodies wherever they are, so that that can be addressed to help other people in other situations?
Nicorette, can I ask you what you feel about that? Like you, when I was in school leadership, it's plan, do and check. And these are our most vulnerable children. So I do agree with you, Robbie. Put that on a tombstone.
I know that, Nancy, you have been escalating things, but we could look at how we can take this forward on our side as well, from a children perspective, yeah.
No, thank you. I think we need to make sure that it's the local authorities where the ICBs for the commissioning of the teams externally, it's the ICBs that we need to go to. The local authorities have an awful lot on their plates. They're not actually responsible for the commissioning arrangement of the health teams in the ICB in their areas. So it would be fantastic for any support you can give us, but we just need to make sure we target the right part of the system.
I think targeting the right part of the system is very important, but I also think it's very important we inform the respective local authority affected relevant committees, your counterparts, Chair, because as we know, ICBs can be a little bit slippery. So we need to make sure that people like yourself who are very good at holding them to account can do so elsewhere. Thank you.
Sorry, and actually I just had a thought while you've been saying that. If we're having poor quality reports sent to us, then the children who are living in that local authority area, thank you, will also be receiving poor quality reports. So thank you, yes.
Thank you as well. Obviously, you introduced me before the meeting to Bex, who is obviously going to be our key contact. I, for one, who've worked with you for nearly 2 decades, are really sad you're going. But so I hate to put Bex on the spot or the ICB, but how do you plan, this person's got a plethora of experience, expertise. She's phenomenal about building relationships. She cares, and she always gets back to you when you contact her. So in my book, she's going to leave a big, enormous gap. So who's going to oversee? And our children in care are vulnerable. They're our priority, and their health needs to be everybody's priority, but especially the ICB. And what's the new structure in place? We can't clone Nancy, can we?
I mean, I wish I could, to be completely frank. So I'm not going to argue with any of the lovely points that you've made about Nancy, and we're really thankful for her tenacious leadership for looked after children over the many years that she's worked in these posts. So the commitment that the ICB has, obviously, we have a statutory responsibility, but that's just a couple of lines on paper. So the commitment that we have to looked after children and children in care is that we've set it as a clinical priority for 26-27, which is wonderful, that we've managed to secure some transformation monies for our provider to support the transformation of the service. And in terms of the workforce, we will recruit substantive looked after children designate nurses, 2 of them into the safeguarding and looked after children team that I will oversee. The executive leadership of the ICB, Adam is very clear as the chief executive that he's the corporate parent. So it's wonderful to have the chief exec aware of his responsibilities for health, for the ICB. And we are very lucky now to have a substantive chief nurse who will continue to be the executive lead for safeguarding and looked after children.
Thank you. And really, we're all corporate parents, so I hope it isn't just Adam, because Nancy's led the way for us. Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, and very quickly, and my point is we're losing so much great staff. The ICB is hemorrhaging a lot of quality. I just need some reassurance in terms of the exit interviews and the comments that will come back from some great leaders who are leaving, and what will you do with that feedback to stop this from happening? Because again, you're going to lose more than just the staff. You're going to lose the wisdom, the knowledge, the DNA of what you're doing, and you find yourself in a whirlpool of continuous learning when you let go of the right stuff. So just that point would be important for me. Thank you.
Thank you. It
keeps me awake at night, the loss of organisational memory with the plethora of staff that have left the organisation. So that's just a personal reflection. With regards to the exit interviews, I do know that our people and culture team have due diligently completed exit interviews and offer them to everybody that is leaving the ICB. I believe that will be fed into our culture improvement plan off the back of our independent culture review, but I don't work in people and OD, so I will double check that and get back to you.
Thank you. Sharon.
Thanks, Joe. Mine's just really quick. Actually, you took my question, but that's fine. I wanted to know who I have to chase if the dental assessments are running behind, because Nancy has got used to me doing it, and I just wanted to say thank you, Nancy, so much. It's been really wonderful working with you. So I just wanted to say that, and as Joe has already said, that Bax is the person that I chase if I feel that the dental assessments are low. So thank you.
Right, thank you, everybody. Vice Chair.
So I move that we note the report, place on record our thanks to Nancy for all the work she's done thus far, and that Nicoletta's team look at how we can do that feedback loop with the LA of the placements for those reports.
Lovely. Is that seconded? Thank you, Mark. And agreed, committee. Thank you all. Thank you, Nancy. Adrian, sorry.
Joe, I know we're running behind, but I think it was right to carry on the scrutiny on that item that overran. That was absolutely right. But I would really crave a 5-minute comfort break, if you'd be so kind.
Can we have 3 minutes? Do you mind?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. The hare and the tortoise. Thank you. Okay. Welcome back. Item 8 of the agenda, Medway Community Healthcare Children's Services, the future. Okay, over to you, Clive and Tracy.
Funny enough, that's my name as well, Clive Tracy. That's very handy. Sorry.
Sorry,
Madam
Tracy
Chair,
Webb as well.
Yes, I'm Clive Tracy. I'm director. I'm from Kent Community Health, and obviously we're working very closely with Medway Community Children's Services, which Tracy leads, and I work very closely with her. I recognise you've read the strategy. This is a very outward-looking strategy. It's quite an ambitious one for the next 3 years, recognising we've got a lot of work to do. We've done a sterling amount of work in the Medway area, and the strategy is very much, there's two parts of it. A little bit inward-looking, because we are coming together as two organisations and taking the best from what we learned, getting our clinicians together, thinking about how do we work differently, and very much some outward-looking things around looking at needs-led approach, best start to life, those areas, and working with, certainly through the family hubs and other ones. So happy to take questions of what we do. We recognise we've got challenges, and hopefully this strategy will help address some of those as well, especially things like waiting times. We know we've got issues there.
Thank you. Wayne, then Robbie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the report. I do have a number of questions, but because of time, I'm going to have one. And if I may, Chair, can I put my other questions in writing and hopefully get a response? Thank you. So I thought the report was very good. Let me start off by saying that. I think there are some things that we could consider further. I think it did lack a bit of past data, which I would like to have seen personally. Thing I love most is it was littered with ambition, and I love ambition, and I'm never going to quash anyone that's got that. So I am particularly pleased with that. So my first question, however, is given that there were 1,499 children currently waiting more than 18 weeks for an ASD diagnosis, how does the strategy guarantee a significant reduction in the backlogs within the next 12 months to 18 months? Because, say, with the figures that were produced, just for those that are listening, you've got an ADHD diagnosis of 5 years, or reaching 5 years, and then the ASD of 4 years, 2 months, and our children, I think, need that quicker.
Fully agree. We've got an awful lot of children waiting a long time for a diagnosis, and that's not acceptable. At the moment, we have got a different approach within Medway to what we do also in Kent, and we're just learning, because part of the pathway within Kent is they get seen by a community paediatrician earlier. They don't get the diagnosis then, so that they get an earlier appointment and then work up to say we need more assessments, more information. Whereas in Medway, we get all that information up front and then they see the paediatrician. So we're just working with our paediatricians across both areas to look at how we change the pathway slightly to try and get that earlier intervention in there as well, because we recognise more earlier intervention, more earlier support is important, and we get that one. But I don't know, Tracy, you want to?
Yes, as Clive said, obviously the waiting times is something that we've been working really hard to address. But in the meantime, what we've put in place is a waiting well offer. So while children, and obviously with their families around them, are waiting for that diagnosis, we've been doing a lot of work around the things that our clinical staff can do to support those children. So we have a social prescriber who can signpost families to support both within MCH and outside of MCH. We're working with selected schools across Medway with the This Is Me programme. So it's very much, as Clive has just said, around a needs-led approach. So although the child may still be waiting for their diagnosis, we're very much looking at the needs of that particular child and putting the wraparound support around them. We have lots of information and signposting that we share with families. So at the time that the referral comes into us, we will be signposting the families to a whole range of support. So yes, the diagnosis is an unacceptable time in waiting for that diagnosis to be made, but there's lots of things that we can do in the meantime to be supporting that child and the family. But in the meantime, we will continue to work closely with Kent Community, and if it means that we restructure our pathway to be able to get the child in front of a paediatrician sooner, then that's something that we really want to focus on.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just come back, Tracy? On the This Is Me project, I sort of read that you were looking to reduce the referrals for the neurodiverse pathway because of that as the early intervention. But my question is, what evidence have you got to show that that works? And also, what difference has it made to children so far as you've already got it running? And then looking ahead, because this is a 3-year plan, Medway children and young people, health and well-being is very fundamentally important. So how will you monitor and report the progress of that intervention, please?
So the This Is Me project has been built on what they've done in Portsmouth. So it's sort of an iteration from that one. In Portsmouth, got a lot of evidence where they had a team early part to do work within schools around profiling, identifying children's need, and then putting some packages of care around the child and the family to support that one. And they've seen how that has reduced the need to go on for diagnosis. There is a cultural issue here that people do want a diagnosis, and because it helps validate, what their child's needs are, and we need to think about how do we. It doesn't always, even though we meet their needs in the school earlier and can do packages, they still will want a diagnosis. We've done some work in West Kent as well. The pilot, this has been a pilot, and we have shown some reductions in there. It doesn't stop the need to go for diagnosis, but what it is doing is come to a point around having that earlier support and some other things about how to support the child with those needs. So it won't always turn the tap off. The other part, though, within the pathway after they've gone through the This Is Me, so they get the profile, they have some interventions. If they flag some urgent needs, we've got a multidisciplinary team approach where the paediatricians and our mental health support team are in that discussion, and they can flag and get that child. So there's a bit of a fast track route. And as a whole system, we've prioritised some children. So children in need, so they looked after children, are flagged. So if they come through and got a need, they get fast tracked. So it does have a little negative effect, because those who have been prioritised do get seen quicker. So we have got children being diagnosed within 3 to 6 months. But it does push the waiting time back for those who haven't been seen, who aren't urgent. So we are still making sure that we are seeing the end tail, but that is slow. But we do know we've got to try and do, and we're not really got enough support to really think about how we're addressing the big backlog.
So, Clive, are you telling me that the vulnerable children in care are fast-tracked and that you triage or prioritise the rest? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. And then, as Tracy said, the work she's been doing on that waiting well also brings in some of that. So if things change, it can allow some of that fast track. The work from the This Is Me also then will allow that if during that profiling identifies a more significant urgent need, again, they've got that escalation route through the MDT approach, and we've got an escalation route.
Thank you. I spent 38 of my years in education, 3 headships. Sometimes young children, perception is they're on that train track. I had a child as a foster carer who they thought had fetal alcohol and had Fragile X when he did get a diagnosis 4 years down the line. How are you going to stop that from happening?
I don't think we are going to stop that happening. If we're really honest, what we can try and do is get those needs met and the support happening earlier if they still need that diagnosis, and there are going to be people who need that diagnosis and want that diagnosis. We need to make sure that we've got both processes working in parallel.
Thank you. Sorry, Robbie. Lisa first.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I've obviously done the training for This Is Me. I wanted to do it because I wanted parents to be able to come to us if they had a question. I didn't want, not to know about the programme myself. I've worked with the team as well through public health to actually work with the commissioning to create the programme in Medway. Fought very hard to ask not to have a delay to being accepted on a pathway to be able to actually, before they have that that This Is Me programme. So the previous programmes, I know that are in Kent, they have to go through that programme before they can go on a waiting list for an assessment. So I fought very hard for that, so I'm really pleased that we didn't get that. But I would say my biggest concern is the lack of funding from the ICB to carry on with these programmes. You know, being obviously in the meetings that I'll get privileged to attend, you know, the reduction in, obviously we've lost our small steps service. I know we're looking at another programme, but it's taken its time to get in place. Families at the moment and schools are coming to us saying, where do I go? Even social workers are coming to us saying, where do we refer our families to? And we, you know, we can guide to some places, but there's not enough. For me, This Is Me at the moment doesn't stretch far enough. And the funding obviously is not there to be able to allow us to do that. And knowing how many schools it's available in, you can't then go and say to your parents, oh, go and talk to your school and ask them to do this, because it might not necessarily be in their school. And I think that is the biggest problem. I think This Is Me is great because it does look at the key eight or nine areas, I have to get it right, of a child's needs, and actually it does identify the support they need. For me, it should be done in early years. Why we need to get this done so that actually as soon as a child comes to school, we're assessing their needs. They might not have that need in 2 years' time, but actually we're prioritising, we're keeping that needs now, and we know how to help that child there and then. I think it will have a really good impact if we can get it done properly, and if we can get that funding in to carry it on.
Do you want to comment on that, Clive?
I think we're working very closely with the commissioners who are in the room. So things like the Send Reform paper and that work, they've asked some funding possibly coming down that route, which may help. And obviously that's a joint approach between the local authority and health. So I think there are some things on the horizon. The work we're doing also, you've been in the meetings, Lisa, and it's been really helpful to have parents and education. We've got a group really looking at neurodiversity and how do we really address that one. And that's made big differences already. So there's things we can do within our own resources and do better, but recognise that, we do need more funding. It is always a challenge, but we need to make sure that we are as efficient as we can be as well with what we have got at the moment.
You. Robbie, then Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to EHCPs. You describe on internal page number 7 that the prevalence is significantly above previous forecasts and existing capacity. Requests for needs assessments have doubled and are forecast to exceed 900 this academic year. I wanted to ask, what do you think is behind that drive for the uptick that you described there? And is there anything Medway specific that you think is behind it?
Thank you. Yes. I think sort of anecdotally what we're finding within the service is that many parents feel that they need to have that EHCP to be able to access support that they feel their child needs. And it is, as Clive has just said, something that we're trying to address by actually doing that needs-led support for children in school so that everything doesn't hinge on a diagnosis. But it is something that we're seeing, and certainly have been seeing over the last year, that the number of requests for EHCP do seem to be steadily climbing. So, obviously our team are working as hard as they can to turn those EHCP reports around, but it is definitely a challenge for us within the service. And I think it's something that we just need to be mindful of and sort of keeping an eye on the trajectory. It's a conversation that we have with commissioners on a very regular basis, but it does certainly seem to be a driver that we've noticed over the last 12 months.
One of the things that I was concerned about with the safety valve programme that Medway was put on was the introduction of banding for higher needs top-up funding for school children. Whereas previously teachers could claim for the highest amount of top-up funding by on their own opinion, now it is basically the case that in order to get anything above the £2,000, 6 grand, for example, you need an EHCP. So I think it's created an incentive for head teachers and teachers to talk to parents about EHCPs because they desperately want the maximum top-up funding so they can get 1 or 2 more assistants in to help not just the special kids but also the classroom because of the shortfall in funding in schools in general. I would very much like you to reflect on that. That has been my opinion for a couple of years now. The team has done very good progress in processing EHCPs. I've been very critical in the past, and I want you to know, Chair, that I do recognise that progress. It's not criticism of that. It's just a byproduct that as we move beyond the safety valve programme constraints and we develop our own policy, perhaps we can reflect on banding if that is, as you may find out, is the driver behind this above national trend. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian.
Thank you, Joe. I've got to say from the outset that the takeover of MCH by KCHFT leaves me a little bit perturbed. Having in the last 2.5 years experienced more contact with the health service than I had in the previous 70, I think I've been a pretty good mystery shopper as how the system works. And I can honestly say that the services that I've had from MCH have been the most consistently good and high quality of the whole contact I've had with the health service over the last 2.5 years. And I also know that some staff are not happy about it and have grave concerns because one member of MCH's staff came to see me at my ward surgery and was extremely concerned. Having said that, I've got to say this report is very positive. It's good. It's heavy on ambition, and I think we all around this table are extremely ambitious for our children here in Medway. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here this evening. But it does worry me that there was a lot of very good things in there, but there was not any way that we could measure them in future reports. Could we have a means that we can track delivery? Because this is absolutely vital we get these services right. And, as a scrutiny committee, we need the material to be able to track progress. But, as I say, very good positive report. If it happens, I'll be very happy. But let's make sure that we can track what happens. So in future reports, I would like to see some KPIs and things we can track. Thank you.
Yep, we'll be delighted to bring those back. So this has now become an organisational corporate project, so it's now reported to the board. It will be. We're just working through, so we've got a project manager behind the scenes, just working through all these actions to say what are those key milestones, how are we going to report those ones. So I'm more than happy that our reporting, which will go to our internal trust board, could come here as well. Yeah, and absolutely, I'll be delighted if we achieve all of this because we recognise this is very ambitious. We've got a willing team and we've got an excellent team. For the Medway element, Medway will stay Medway, and we're very much focused on that one. It is a neighbourhood, so the clinicians, what we're trying to do is take the learning shared. And we are doing some cross-working already where it's having a benefit, because that's really important. So we've seen some shared posts where we've struggled before, and we can get a bit more resilient through that. We can attract more staff, we can retain those staff. So you can see that part of that is around our people development within that one. So a lot of the staff, and Tracy obviously sits from Medway, so you can comment around how your staff in the children's service feel.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think it's fair to say that at the beginning of this journey, there was some anxiety about what that might mean for our services. But I have to say, since working with Clive and his other assistant directors and heads of service, we've had lots of opportunities to come together. So public health nursing have held workshops together. Specialist therapies have done likewise. There has absolutely been a lot of shared learning. And I think it's fair to say that as much as we're learning from Kent Community, and one of the things we just said earlier is around looking at our paediatrician clinical pathway. So absolutely, we've been learning from Kent Community, but I think it's fair to say that our Kent colleagues have also been learning from us. And there's some really good things that we do in MCH that your team are very keen to take on board. So I think it's around making sure that we don't lose any of that best practice that we do within MCH, sharing that knowledge with Kent, but equally also looking at how pathways are managed in Kent. And that, I think those economies of scale and having that bigger pool of staff is going to be really helpful. And we're already starting to reap some benefits from working with Kent colleagues, because there are some services that Clive's team are already running in Kent that we've been able to piggyback on for the benefit of our Medway children. So I think we will continue to do that and to learn from each other.
Okay, Sharon, then Leah.
Thank you, Jo. I'm crossing out all the questions that have already been asked. So with my FASD advocate hat on, the neurodiverse pathway, FASD is still not on it, even though we've discussed it a couple of times at Scrutiny before, and it was children's. Do we know what the waiting time for an FASD diagnosis is?
I don't specifically know the number. I do know, however, that our clinical lead, Dr. Godong, has a specialist interest in FASD. So I know that the service that we provide is good, but clearly can be better. And our waiting times clearly need to improve as well. But I'm very happy to take that back as a question and come back to you with that specific response.
Yeah, if it can be put on the neurodiverse pathway as well. And also, what's the unmet need for speech therapy and occupational therapy, and how are you going to try and close that gap?
Okay. So at the moment with our speech and language therapy, so our waiting list at the moment is that we have 565 children on our list waiting for speech therapy, with just over 280 waiting more than 18 weeks, which again is too high. We have been looking at how we can increase our capacity within that service. So although we have a number of registered speech and language therapists, we also have assistants that work with them. So we're looking at how we can actually open up capacity by making better use of our assistant staff. Our occupational therapy has also been quite challenging in terms of our staffing. We currently have 182 children on our waiting list for occupational therapy, of which 105 are waiting over 18 weeks. But we have just recently started some blitz clinics. So again, just increasing our capacity, really focusing on the OT provision that we have. Those two professions within MCH, I have to say, probably are the most challenging in terms of recruitment. We have just recently, unfortunately, had a resignation from one of our occupational therapists who is moving over into private practice. And we think we probably may have another occupational therapist resign in the coming weeks, because she's going to go and work in London, where obviously London waiting means that she's going to be earning some more money. We have got those posts out to advertise at the moment, and I'm pleased to say we have had quite a lot of response in terms of applications, but it is an ongoing challenge to keep our speech therapy and our occupational therapy posts filled. Again, it's why we're keen to be working with Kent, because we're Clive's team, if he does have some additional capacity or some capacity to spare, hopefully we can be sharing resources to be able to manage those waiting times. But it is always a concern of mine that we have waits for speech and language therapy. We have got in place things like tiny talkers, which is where our health visitors working across the family centres are picking up speech and communication issues early on and providing the support that they can, but where they feel that there is a specific need for speech therapy, our health visitors are working very closely with our speech and language therapy team. So it is really just trying to ensure that we have that team around the child to be able to respond. But yeah, waiting times are still a problem for us, and we do need to be addressing those as best we can.
So can I just quickly come back, Jo? So that's I've applaud you for your waiting well. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's good. But if that one of their child's need is speech and language, and you're talking about EHCPs, it was a speech and language person that helped me get some of my EHCPs because they picked up on something. So if the child's doing the waiting well, but they haven't got access to the before they get the diagnosis, they're still not getting what they need, then waiting well is not working.
Yes, so you're absolutely right to point that out. So if we receive a referral and it's for a child to be triaged and they go onto our neurodiversity pathway, if within that referral and that initial contact with the child, we can see that there's a speech issue, then they will be seen by a speech therapist. So they won't be waiting that long length of time for a diagnosis and to then be referred on to speech therapy. So although they're on that waiting list for an assessment and a diagnosis, if they require speech therapy or occupational therapy, then they are fast-tracked into that particular profession. So it is around identifying their needs. And it, you know, for many of their children, they have more than one need. So they have more than one profession that they need to be accessing. And so we will identify through a prioritisation process. If they need speech therapy, then we will address that early doors as opposed to waiting for, you know, a long length of time for them to be seen.
Leah, then Liz.
I think all of my questions have been answered. Oh, no, sorry, I'm wrong. I was going to say all my questions have been answered. But there was one question I had around the amount of time or the amount of safeguarding appointments that are attended. I think it was around 70%. I wondered, why would there ever be a time where a healthcare professional that's involved in that child wouldn't attend a safeguarding meeting about them?
I think one of the issues we have is that sometimes the request to attend a safeguarding meeting is made at very short notice for you know, very good reasons, but it's not always possible for us to be able to free up a clinician to be able to attend that meeting. However, they will always make sure that they will send a report in, so there's always information that we will be gathering together and making available at that meeting. But as much as we do our absolute utmost to make sure that we have a clinician attend the meeting, it just isn't physically always possible. But it is something that we're always looking at those KPIs and making sure that we address those if we feel that the numbers are falling away. But it is just the notice that we're given for attendance at that meeting means it just isn't always possible to attend.
But if somebody doesn't attend, there is a report that is made, so health is inputting into that, or MCH are inputting into that. It's not MCH.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Liz, then Jacqueline.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question around the community nursing team, because I was sort of reading the report about there being sort of strong working relationships with staff at Medway Hospital, but I'm assuming sort of a lot of the referrals all come from London hospitals as well. So I just wonder about the sort of the working relationships with the staff there, and just also how you sort of manage care going forward once you've got a referral and a child, how you sort of manage expectations, because I assume that they'll be referred for a particular reason, but then I appreciate they can't be the sort of, you know, there will have to be GPs and paediatricians involved as well, but how you sort of manage the child and the family with regards to ongoing care. So, you know, I noticed on the website that your main aim is to keep the child out of hospital. So, you know, I just want to know how that works in practice, really. Thank you.
Yes, so absolutely. We do have very good working relationship with Evelina and King's College, and obviously from Great Ormond Street if we have children referred from there. So there is a quite constant dialogue between our teams and the tertiary teams in London. And then that forms part of the assessment of the child before the child's actually discharged home. So we already have that very good level of information around the needs of the child before they come home. That may include provision of equipment, etc. And then, yes, our nursing teams would then be going in to do that ongoing care. We obviously have staff of many different grades, so it may be a more senior staff will go in and do the initial assessment and setting up of whatever form of nursing care is needed, and would then hand over to a more junior member of staff going forward. We obviously work closely with continuing healthcare, so if it's an ongoing need and a package of care is needed, then our staff would be inputting into those decisions as well around what the need of the child is. But for many children, yes, they are on our books for a number of months, if not years, obviously as their needs are met. So, yeah.
Jacqueline.
So I was looking at section 8 about the learning disabilities and co-designing and developing inclusive approaches to reduce health inequities. And the report outlines that currently there's work with the Learning Disability Nursing Team, working proactively to promote independent toileting for children with additional needs. I'm aware that currently some children with additional needs in Medway do not receive the continence, the toileting support from the Learning Disability Team, and that sits under the Special School Nursing Team, who have slightly different training, experience, knowledge, and ways of working with families to support with toileting. And my question is, are there plans going forwards to change that so that they're all sitting under the same service, or is that something that will remain with the special school nursing team as you're moving on? Thinking about the equality of the service that's provided.
It's a very good point. So one of the things you see as a strategy is trying to get to one children's service, and people think about it as a single service rather than individual little bits of services, so that we get more joined up care and consistency. There's 3 clinical areas, I think, which we really do need to address, and I want some we're going to set up some workshops to bring schools, all the partners involved in it. Toileting is one of those ones, because I recognise our bladder and bowel teams are saying that we're putting children in products far too early, and then they're staying in products for an awful long time. Our approaches to toileting are different between some of our teams, some of the advice we give in schools. So one of the things we want to do is get a whole system group together, workshop, to look at how do we really approach toileting in its needs. The other one is behavioural management, and the other big pathway is sleep and sleep management, because again, I think those 3 areas is someone I think as a whole system we could do something better with. So I think that one I want to bring forward and address those areas.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, because we certainly see that some children, again, I'm aware some schools are not commissioned necessarily to access the learning disability team support. It sits under the different service with the special school nursing team. And again, being aware of differences in training and support. Often what the learning disability team offer is more at home with parent support, which is something that the special school nursing team are unable to provide currently as it's set up. And so that would be really appreciated if those things were considered moving forwards.
Thank you. Douglas, then Paula.
Thank you. This will be a quick one, hopefully. In terms of the overall figures for people waiting for EHCP assessments, how much of that is supplemented or complemented by the private sector, where parents have chosen to go for their pre-assessments outside of the normal bodies because they either had a bad outcome from the schools in the first place, or some reason lack of confidence? Because I have a suspicion that the figures that don't show the complete picture of the new industry that's fast emerging from the private sector who are doing these assessments, and that in a sense could bring about a issue of standards, quality control. How are you then going to be ensuring that these private assessments meet the right standards?
I'm not sure that's something we can fully answer. Those ones, obviously, we know our standards. I think maybe the commissioners have probably got a better overview of the whole system, but I think it's a real challenge. We do know that we've got families on both pathways waiting for trying to go private and also staying on an NHS pathway, hoping to see which one can do a diagnosis quicker and faster there. So there is a bit of a challenge around understanding that whole system and what's driving some of those.
Can we tap into your expertise there, Paul?
Thank you. I think, it is something we're aware of. I think it's very difficult to quantify, and I think it would something we probably do need to spend more time investigating, and I'll take that back to the team to look at how we can do that, because it's something we're very aware of.
the data is skewed if we don't know the routes of access to these services.
Sorry, just to clarify, Paul, it wouldn't be the data that you would hold in the council. It'd actually be the data that the ICB will hold. So it would be those families who are using a right to choose pathway. So when you go to your GP, you can say, I don't want to go through MCH, I want to go through a different provider and use a right to choose pathway. It's my understanding that the ICB doesn't yet have the granular detail within that right to choose pathway to be able to understand. So they might have the numbers, but they don't know how many are children and how many adults. They don't have the granular detail within that right to choose pathway. So they think there's a significant piece of work that's going to go on in the ICB, because exactly that, they need to understand the totality of the cost of families and adults going through that diagnosis pathway. So yeah, MCH and KCHFT wouldn't have that data. Is something the ICB will have to do work to try and get to the bottom of.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Paula.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is a little bit sort of left field, so go with me on this, okay? So Ofsted is increasingly placing a considerable focus on oracy, yeah. And obviously we have our local commitment to to children having the best start in life. So you've already flagged that we've got considerable challenges in terms of speech and language services. So I'm wondering, given that we are going to have potentially increased numbers of referrals, because schools will start to pick up on issues around oracy and therefore more speech and language challenges that some students will be facing. How are we going to, what's the current thinking around that to begin with? Have you even thought, how have you factored that into the future strategy? But also in terms of being more prepared, so transitioning from that kind of reactive referral system to a much more holistic system-wide model. So obviously we've got a perfect window now with the potential, well, the actual integration that's going forward. So my questions are, oracy is going to be headlines in future. Schools are going to be slightly more obsessed with it, given that they're obsessed with Ofsted and all things Ofsted. We're going to see more referrals. How are we going to deal with that? And how are we going to put a system in place that's going to be great for all young children and young people so that they get what they need?
Yeah. Very good point. So one of the things we are commissioned to deliver is what they call a balanced system for speech and language and communication needs. So we've started to implement that in Kent, and we'll be using the same part within Medway to bring that forward. That's very much looking at a universal provision, working with the schools to say, how do we have a named speech and language therapists and people to work within the school around the school environment, but also some of the strategies for that early need and early identification, and working with the schools to deliver some of that one, and then freeing up the specialist time to do the specialist bit. And we've seen some real benefits in that. The other part is, Tracy's already mentioned some of that talking, walking type approach, where those drop-ins, and doing that again, we've done that with speech and language therapy a lot more. So again, that earlier picking up identified needs. And the other part is working with our health visiting team around the early assessment, so an ELIM assessment, which is about early language, those. And we've actually put speech and language therapists within our health visiting teams within Kent. But again, and it goes back to the point you made around breaking down some of the silos. It's not a health visiting team, it's not a speech and language team, it's a children's service around the child, and actually bringing the right skills in at the right time, so we don't get referrals, because I always think referrals are a bit of a handoff, because we've referred to that service and it's their problem. No, actually, it's all of our problem to manage that one. So I think the balance model, when we can get that in, will help working with the schools, and we've seen some of the benefits of that. It's not the panacea to everything, but it does help. But I think getting our offer around what the universal offer is, and then what is our targeting and specialist offer, and really focusing and meeting those needs in a different way earlier. And a lot of all of this strategy is around doing things earlier rather than waiting for a diagnosis and a medical type model of diagnosis and a long wait. it. The more we can meet needs in the future, the better it is if we can do up front. But it has to be a whole system approach. So we've got to work with the family hubs, we've got to work with schools, we've got to work with the voluntary sector to deliver this jointly.
Thanks, Clive. Can Ailish come back a moment?
Oh, so I guess my question is, have you factored in this big push that's coming from Ofsted in terms of your future strategizing?
Sorry, can I just... I think one of the real opportunities here is the new SEND reforms and the expert hands model that's built within the SEND reforms. And that is about building capability and capacity within education settings right from early years through to post-16, specifically around speech and language, OT, and educational psychology as well. So the guidance is hot off the press, and we are working our way through that at the moment in terms of what that means. There are risks within it because there isn't the workforce out there necessarily as well, so we also have to think about a graduated response to that and how we build up to that. But it is absolutely about increasing the capability within education settings to be able to support children around their speech and language needs. And I think there's a real opportunity there.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to come back to Douglas's point earlier around the private referrals and private diagnosis. I think a lot of our families are actually putting themselves in debt because actually they want to get their child to support early enough. However, I would also say some of those referrals actually come from school. Yeah. So schools are actually making referrals to private therapists because quite often there isn't the commissioned service for those children from mainstream schools. So once they reach a certain age, it's not commissioned in that service. So I think we have a lot of services that actually we could offer, but obviously we don't have the staff. But there is a gap there, and I think that parents will go out and find that support for their child because they don't think anyone else is listening, and they're worried that their child is going to struggle. And I think as a parent myself, you sit there and you start worrying that your child's going to come in this big down spiral. If they can't read or write, they're going to be ending up in the youth justice system like we were talking about earlier on. And how does that keep going on and on for them? And where does it live? Where do they end up in the end of life? And you want the best for your child, so you put that money in early if you can. Many parents can't. So, it's wonderful for those that can, but what are we doing for those that can't?
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, Vice Chair. Oh, I missed. No, I didn't miss you, did I? Okay, Robbie, can you not do, for the lateness of hour, Wayne and I are putting our supplementary questions in to get answered, because I'm determined that Medway isn't in a sea of indifference with this merger. So can you do that? And I'll make sure the Vice Chair writes it in that we're going to expect our questions answered. Okay?
Just to follow on Councillor Hamady-Shea's point about the granularity of data. Pardon?
Douglas in this committee for our young people.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know his first name. Douglas's point about the granularity of data is needed. My brother's a clinical psychologist who's trained in autism assessments, and absolutely, Lisa, as you said, many people present to people he knows and his friends in that field utterly desperate. So because they feel the need, and particularly in Medway as well, they are getting pressure from schools because the schools want to evidence the need for the top-up funding. So any granularity of data on that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair, would you add that Wayne and I are writing supplementary questions to Clive and Tracy?
I move that we note the report, request tracking and KPIs in future reports, and that Wayne and Joe are both going to send you some follow-up questions. Thanks.
Is that seconded? Thank you. And agreed? Thank you, and thank you for your time this evening, and expect some questions from Stephanie. Thank you on our behalf. Okay, item 9 of the agenda, our sufficiency strategy, and James, you're going to lead.
Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, for the minutes, can I just say Sharon is leaving because of a conflict of interest, yeah?
Thanks, Chair. So given the lateness of the hour, I won't give too much of an overview, but hopefully colleagues have had a chance to read. Just to reassure people, it is currently being designed so it's accessible and looks very pretty and all of those sorts of things. So that should be ready next week and obviously will be circulated accordingly. So the 3 things that I just want to highlight for members of the board is the changes that have happened in the last 3 years. So from a national and local perspective, I think when you read that section in detail, lots and lots of different things have happened around inspections, frameworks, legislation, you know, all of those sorts of things. To note the solid progress made against the existing strategy, but also note the areas of continued development that we're looking to pursue over the course of this new strategy. So happy to take any questions and comments.
Robbie, then Mark.
Thank you, Chair. My questions pertain to the National Transfer Scheme. It was actually Dr. Leanne that schooled me last time I raised this about the judgment about why Medway was not in the National Transfer Scheme for unaccompanied asylum seeker children and why we had to now be in that scheme. So I understand that point now. In the report, I was concerned to read that the number of children in care, the number of people in the system, in this particular system, has gone up 20% in 3 years. And my understanding from reading the report is that is because we've taken 80 unaccompanied asylum seeker children in. For the record, I don't want people to think I'm against unaccompanied asylum seeker children. I actually think as a country, if there's anyone we should help, it should be unaccompanied asylum seeker children. My concern relates to the fact that the report points to the fact that we're using less in-house foster carers now than we were 3 years ago, and that the number of placements going external has increased, and there are concerns in the report about capacity and requirements for additional funding. So I would like to know, are these 80 children which we now have that come in the last 3 years, are they all a direct result of the National Transfer Scheme? Like, were they mandated upon us, or did we ask for additional capacity? What is our assessment to be able to adequately support these vulnerable children, particularly those with high needs? And what is a quantifiable assessment of the potential financial impact that you describe in the report? There's no figures in it. So I'd like to know, are we talking about a little bit of money? Are we talking a concerning amount of money? Because obviously some of the money comes back from the Home Office as it pertains to these children, but my understanding is not sufficient to cover very much the complex needs support that they often need.
I will attempt to answer those various points. So with regards to our young refugees, yes, we've had 80 in the period that we've been in the National Transfer Scheme. They've all been part of the National Transfer Scheme. Some have been allocated to us, some we've accepted through that scheme. Some of them, the reason the numbers don't quite work out in there is a lot of the young refugees that we take in are 17, 18 years of age, and so they might well have moved on and gone into adults post-18. I mean, I'll let Mariah maybe ask the question about the funding that we get incoming, but I think what I would say about how we have managed the situation with young refugees, we had a recent visit from the National Transfer Scheme come to Medway, and they said that we were one of the most effective local authorities that they've worked with around the National Transfer Scheme. We have really high standards of accommodation that we offer them, just as we would any of our other children in care, because that's effectively what they are. And actually we do it in a really timely manner. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the National Transfer Scheme, often you get an enhanced fee if you can place those young people quickly. So within 3 days, 5 days, all but one of those young people we've met that deadline, so therefore have brought additional funding into the council by the timeliness of the placement and the smooth transition of those young people. We've got a range of different partnerships that support our young refugees, so that includes different supporting accommodation providers, our own supported homes scheme, specific foster carers who will cater specifically about cultural matches with those young people, and lots of other different elements. So I'll let Mariah answer the question about the funding that we receive, but I would like to point out that I think it's about £300,000 that we've received from payments by doing it in a timely manner.
Yes, so last year we spent out 3.5 million, just under, on asylum seeker children and children in care asylum seekers, and we received in from central government 2.4 million. So the council made a contribution of about 1.1 million. Our budget for the current financial year is for the local authority to make a contribution of about £1.4 million, again based on those number of pupils that we looked after. You were right, it was about £300,000, and the difference and the shortfall is what happens to the funding we receive when a young person turns 18, even though they are a care leaver. So we get about £1,000 a week if they're under 18. That reduces to about £300 a week when they turn 18, and that's the difference.
And I think if I can add to that, and it was something that was raised, I think, at the last corporate parenting board, is if we were looking to improve one part of that system, it would be the timeliness of the decision post-18 to give those young people the leave to remain, because at that point the local authority still continues to support them, and the timeliness of those decisions can often go on for several months, and we still have to obviously provide care and support and accommodation. So I know Councillor Maple was going to take that on to kind of write to central government to ask about that.
My understanding was, and I think you alluded to when you said that the placements were made through the scheme in addition to those that are imposed upon us by some kind of mandatory requirement. So it would imply that there's a policy decision by the administration to be more generous than the statutory minimum. That would be my understanding. That's their prerogative. I understand that fully. My question is, does that equate for the shortfall of the £1.1 million shortfall, i.e. the generosity gap between what we get and what it's costing taxpayers? Is it costing taxpayers £1.1 million to be additionally generous in receiving the scheme? Do you just understand what I'm trying to say? I'm just trying to quantify it.
I can answer that straight away. So our allocation based on our population and numbers is 63 young people. The 80 young people you talk about is over the space of that 3 years. So currently, I think we've got 44 young people under the age of 18 that we support. So we are under our, assessed number for an area of our size. Where I talk about some are given to us through the scheme, sometimes the National Transfer Scheme will say, actually, we've got these young people of these backgrounds from these countries. Can anybody offer a cultural match or a home for them? So sometimes it's better for us as a local authority to say, actually, yes, we have got a vacancy in this supported accommodation flat, and actually all the other young people are Afghanistan or Somalian or whatever that may be. So that's a balance for us as a local authority to take a proactive stance, knowing what our provision looks like and who we've got in there, and that we actually have a match there available for them. So it's not over and above our allocated number. It's a case of us choosing to actually take some of these young people based on their profiles.
Yeah, I understand and totally respect the idea of appropriateness, particularly cultural matching. My point, perhaps you may be able to answer, is what's the funding cost about that? Because what I want is you guys to be able to choose to be generous, but the taxpayers have it funded from the central pot, as I think we all agree it should be, if that makes sense.
So part of the reason, as James said, we've got fewer, I think you said it was about 38 under 18. We also have the care leavers who are over 18 that don't count towards our 66. So they are separate. So we only get about £300 a week for them from central government. Absolutely. So our expenditure on those are more than actually we receive in income. And again, we give the same offer to our care leavers who are US as our non-US care leavers.
How does that equate to the difference in funding between what we do to non-people from through the scheme? Does that cost trail implication that legacy costs remain the same irrespective of the child's background, or is it
sorry. The average cost of a supported accommodation placement for Medway is about £1,100 per week. That is more than we receive in funding from central government because it's based on a national statistic. If you add those up, that's where the funding starts to build up.
Okay, thank you. Mark. Good
Thank you,
night,
Chair.
and thank you, Youth Council.
Thank you for the detailed report, and there's some really good stuff in that. I like to look at the numbers, and I've looked at the numbers, and they confuse me a little bit. So I just wanted a bit of clarity. So within the year, at the end of the year, we said we had 539 children. It mentions that on the chart that we have in-house foster carers, which I think will be the number of 85. But then when you go down in the report, it says that we have kinship care, which I don't know where they come under, 300 children, and it says in independent financial foster agency placements increased to 358 in 2025. So adding all them numbers together, I'm well above 539. So can you please clarify on the numbers?
Do you want me to help you out there? So our kinship care would be things like our special guardianships orders or our child arrangement orders. They don't tend to be children in care. They tend to be actually child protection, child in need, personal arrangements. So they would fall into the line of client placement packages support rather than children in care.
Thank you. Adrian.
Yes, my question's about special guardianship orders as well. But first of all, can I say, James, a very good report, and it's good. There's some really good progress being made over the last year or two, so that's really good to see. One thing I've noticed at the fostering panel is that we've got quite a number of quite young children being now in the care of their grandparents, and from the feedback from that, it's been a really good arrangement on both sides. What does concern me, though, is that as the grandparents get older and need more care themselves, and it's good to have Leanne here in the room, because I think we need some joined up work here between children's services and adult services to make sure that instead of being looked after, that the child doesn't become the carer themselves. And but it's still the best place for them to be with their grandparents. But if that extra support could be given to the grandparents, and that would enable those guardianship orders to carry on, because from what I've seen, we've had people come back. There's been some really good results from that. But it does concern me that perhaps in the future we do need to think about putting that extra support in so those arrangements can continue.
I think just to reassure you, when we are making those decisions to support children to remain living with their family members, and specifically with grandparents, aunties and uncles, we're also looking at what's the support network around that family, who else within that family unit can support the grandparents, and we're always looking at what is the contingency plan just in the event something happens. So we are not just looking at here and now, we do look into the future and what support those families might need. So from our perspective in terms of the care planning and putting those proposals before the court, we need to make sure that we have a contingency plan in place when one is needed.
And just to add to that, and it might be a future agenda item, the kinship care pilot that we've just got goes towards some of the things you're talking about. How do we wrap around some of those wider family to enable that to be workable and to support them and get the additional support? So that's one of the big benefits of that kinship pilot that we've just got the funding for. It's happening now.
Yeah, Adrian, we were lucky to be one of the 7 pilots of that. And, as an experienced foster carer, children do want to be with their family. And so that will be brilliant. And I've seen social workers working to strengthen that unit of extended family as well. Thank you for the report, James, which I really, really liked. I loved the reduction in unregistered foster care as well, because I do think that for safety's sake, that's important. So well done for that. Any other questions? Okay, Vice Chair.
Sorry, I had a really quick question. I was putting my hand up, but I missed it.
Oh,
Am I okay to
sorry.
ask it, Jo?
Yeah, please.
So it was on the bit around care leavers and temporary accommodation. I just wondered if we had a reason why our care leavers are really, the figures are low, but why are they ever ending up in temporary accommodation? That's my question.
Okay, yeah. So which particular data are you looking at? Is it the suitable accommodation?
11.
Okay, so with care leavers, with suitable accommodation, so unsuitable accommodation, there could be a number of things, which includes custodial sentences and those sorts of things. So some of those are out of our control. And also, I think it's fair to say that some young people who are care leavers make their own decisions about where they want to go and live and what they do. So we can only have a certain amount of control. The thing that we can do is try and make sure that us alongside housing providers and our own housing team is that if young people want to use some of the housing that we've got for care leavers, that it's available and it's of good quality. Because ultimately, you know, if you're post 18, young people can make their own decisions, and that might not always be in line with, you know, what the social worker or the PA might say. So it is something that we've got active working groups around care leavers and care leavers accommodation. We're constantly trying to match young people well ahead of their 18th birthday with what that future might look like. But ultimately, you know, young people can make their decision post 18.
So I think maybe it's that this question isn't really for you. It might be more for housing, but it's not. If they've gone into temporary accommodation, then that's not their decision. They've approached us for housing and we've placed them in temporary accommodation, surely. So that's not a decision they've made as they've left care. That's us not having housing stock for them, I would assume.
I mean, Nicoletta, you might want to come in, but we have very few, if any, young people in temporary accommodation in Medway. Clearly, if young people want to move to a different part of the country, they then you know, go into that area's housing system and get allocated that. So whilst they're in Medway, and I haven't got the numbers to hand, but I you know, it's none if a very small handful are in temporary accommodation. That's something that actually we're very good at, you know, preventing. We might need to take a little bit longer to support them until something appropriate comes up, but we don't run big temporary accommodation provisions like some other areas. That just doesn't exist.
It was coming back to me straight after that, wasn't it? Sorry, I forgot. I move that we note the report and the priorities for the next 3 years. I think.
Is that seconded? Yes, thanks, Mark, and agreed. Thank you all. Okay, item 10 on the agenda, and it's over. Oh. Thank you. We can get Sharon back. So we're on item 10, and it's the one Medway Council Plan.
Given the late hour, I'm suggesting that we take just any questions that anyone has on this report, please.
Okay. Wayne, then Adrian.
Thank you, Jo, but I've just got to point out once again, we're still a sea of red, aren't we? 52.6% below target and 42.1% still getting worse. I'm told that these are stretching targets and it's going to take time, but how much more time is needed? And perhaps we should remember that the A in SMART is achievable. And it worries me that if quarter after quarter after quarter, the target seems unachievable, are people going to go that extra mile to try and do it? Perhaps it might be better to adjust some of these measures accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Golvin. One of the things in terms of how these targets are positioned, Medway is positioned very well for the reforms. And if you look at the reforms and what is expected, there is, and I'm talking shorthand here, a move away from statutory hard end of things through the system into prevention. And most of the targets that you'll see here will reflect that. And you can see on some of them, they may be red, but there's a long upward trend on this. So sitting here tonight, I am still confident, and I would not recommend to change just yet.
Wayne, then Mark.
Thank you. So as I read the data, 16, 17-year-olds who are not in NEET, and their destinations are known, we are really poor. We're in the bottom 20% nationally. So I'd like to know why it is that Medway is performing so much worse than our regional neighbours and nationally in securing destinations for our young people. And what, within the report, it said there was extra support of money that was being allocated to pull Medway out of the bottom quartile. So where's it coming from? How are we going to achieve those goals in order to, rank us a lot better than where we're currently sitting? And I do have other questions, but like before, Joe, if I may, can I put those in writing as well?
That would be great, Wayne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we are actually better than national on unknown destination young people. We sit above them and better than regional as well. On NEETs, however, we are in the bottom 20%, and that's somewhere we don't want to be. We have been in the top quintile in about 3 or 4 years ago. Since that time, we have lost over 60 providers from the Kent and Medway training provider arena, and that has meant that a lot of the pressure has been put onto Mid-Kent College and to school sixth forms to meet the needs and the requirements that the young people want. And I think part of the issue stands, and we are doing a lot of work investigating this, working with the DFE on pilot projects, working with schools on pilot projects. For example, we're working with the 3 worst performing schools of producing NEETs on a pilot starting in this month. And that will take us through to the autumn term with the currently year 10s and then working with them in the year 11 to look to prevent them becoming NEET. We're working with electively home educated young people in year 10 and 11 because they are very likely to become NEET when they reach 16. And we're working with the youth justice team with a cohort there of the year 10 and the year 11s. And both those, the EHE pilot and the youth justice pilot are very successful. The engagement levels are well above 50%, which doesn't sound great, but these are notoriously hard to engage cohorts. And it continues to rise, and I get monthly updates on the engagement, and the engagement is consistently increasing by 1% or 2% each month. So that's positive, and we'll wait to see how this pilot with the 3 worst performing schools. Now they are being funded from this extra money that you mentioned, which is money that has been provided through the council as a priority area for this year. For the portfolio holders in for Councillor Price and Councillor Coombs, and for senior members, and that's they've agreed to fund us that £250,000 additional money for us to put some of these projects into place. Because in the past, or recent past, we get £300,000 grant from the government for this work, but that covers very little apart from staff salaries and the rental that we have on the Roundhouse Bus Depot office where our IAG team sit, so that young people, and that itself has been a success because young people wouldn't come to Gunwharf. They didn't want to go, they found it intimidating. And so having the bus depot available to them, the bus depot office that is accessible, and again, the engagement has increased significantly with young people who are NEET. So there's lots of work going on. We haven't spent the money yet. We're still planning on how we're going to spend that money over the course of this year, but we expect that our NEET numbers will start to come down. One example, TCHC are a training provider for young people NEET who are in construction, who want construction training, which is a big area of demand from young people. And we're funding from capital pots a refurbishment of a building for them to double the numbers of young people that they can take into that training course, which lasts a year. And that not only trains them in certain areas of construction, but also in maths and English and employability skills. Because maths and English and employability skills are the three areas where our young people seem to struggle the most. And it isn't helped by the strict criteria that school sixth forms have, where if a young person doesn't achieve their maths and English, then they are not able to go on to sixth form, and they then come to the IAG team. And what hasn't helped that even further is that these young people are expecting to have been staying on at sixth form. They haven't got their grades. They're then not able to stay on at sixth form, but they haven't got a plan B. And by then it's too late, because the colleges are full. There are very few training providers, and so they just add to the needs.
No, thank you very much, Paul. And as said earlier, all students currently taking their GCSEs, A-levels, best of luck to them. But those that don't achieve, as you've rightly said, the IAG team are there to support, and hopefully that's well known by everyone as well. So thank you.
And yes, thank you for that. And indeed, we do actually run drop-in sessions in August after the exam results day for those young people to come and see us and get immediate support if they haven't got a plan B.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to performance, I think the biggest thing is performance. If we're not meeting target, are we the direction of travel? But there is 4 of the 7 that are red that it's downward long trend. I just wonder if I don't need an answer straight away, because potentially need to look at them. What's the plan in place to try and, even not going to meet the target, but change that direction of travel on them 4 items? And maybe next time we have this item, we can just have a little bit of feedback on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair?
I move that the committee notes the Q4 25-26 progress of the performance indicators used to monitor progress of the Council's priorities as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. And we note the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 2 to the report.
Lovely. And Wayne and I are going to put some questions in as well. Is that seconded? Thank you, Wayne. And agreed? Thank you all. And it's the work programme. Over to Vanessa. Thank you for looking after me this evening and us all.
Thank you, Chairperson. So nothing to add to the report, but Stephanie has asked me to remind everyone about the upcoming performance workshop session on the 22nd of June at 6 o'clock on Teams. Thank you.
That's data management. Okay, so it'd be lovely to see as many of you there as we possibly can get. Thank you. And that's the end of the meeting. Well done, everybody.